to spend the next few minutes both reflecting on the Wisdom Well blog post I posted this morning, but also to actually give you an exercise. Oops. What is that? Well, we don't need that.
It's your mom.
Everybody
go ahead and mute yourself if you're not on mute. Thank you so much, guys.
This is my phone, strangely enough. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. So one of the things that's very, very real about the time we're living in right now is it doesn't feel like a wonderful life. It feels quite different than a wonderful life. So I want to actually maybe set the table for the day and offer you some thoughts about how it can be a wonderful life. Offer you some thoughts that will really be a bookend to what Mark Friedman, the CEO of Encore, and really one of my modern elders and mentors, is going to talk about. He wrote a book. He's written many books, but he wrote a book called How to Live Forever. And it is not about how to go into Silicon Valley and learn how to live till 120 years old. It's truly how to be generative, to pass something on to other people. All right, so first of all, first thing for you to do is, how many of you have actually seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life before? Go ahead and in the chat, tell us how many times you've seen it. And let's see who has the highest number, because, you know, for some of you, let's see what we got: 10, 15, 30, could not count, 20. It's probably the most watched film of all time. Now, why is that? Why is it that people watch, now that we usually watch it around Christmas time, but what is it about that film that brings people back to watch it again? If you can raise, maybe Carrie or somebody can help me with this. If someone's raising their hand, let's call on them, and let's call on 3 people. What is it that brings you back to watching It's a Wonderful Life over and over again? So. Okay,
Chip's throwing a curveball. All right, so Mira, go ahead, you're up.
It's redemptive. He has problems with his life, and he goes way down, thinks he's not worth anything, and then he's redeemed and sees his life was beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. Here's a cheers of my green juice to you. All right, let's go for a second one.
Okay. I'm looking. Who's got a hand? Hold your hand really high. Okay, Alec Tiddy, go ahead.
That'd be Tidy.
Tidy.
He's got titties too, but I'm sorry.
I got titties too, and I don't have my bra on.
Go.
Family. We watched it at forever with our family, and it's a great family show and great leadership and just a great story. Love it.
Right, thank you, Alec.
All right, I'm going to do Diane Johnson. You are our last one.
Great. Brilliant direction by George Cukor. It's a story of good and evil and heart and ethics and overextension of one's resources and life and caring. It's about caring.
Beautiful.
I could go on, but I'll stop. Hi, Chip.
Reverend Diane. That's Reverend Diane there, guys, just so you know. Well, thank you. Those are great answers. They've actually done studies on this, and actually here are the qualities that people most cite that film as be about: loyalty, selflessness, resilience, and being a community hero. What does it mean to be a community hero? Well, for those of you who read my Wisdom Well post this morning, and for some of you who haven't been at MEA in a long time, you may even know that there's a daily Wisdom Well post. You can find it on the MEA website and sign up for it. You get an email every morning. There's something in social science called the George Bailey effect. They've studied this. So let me take you back, for those of you who don't know the film. There's this guy named Clarence, who's an angel. And Clarence, sort of like a Saul, Clarence is trying to earn his wings. and he earns his wings by doing good things. So he takes George, who is on the verge of suicide, and he's on the bridge right there in Bedford Falls, and he takes him through sort of a sliding door scenario of what Bedford Falls would be like if George didn't exist. It's sort of a journey that helps George Bailey understand that he had an effect. And in fact, Clarence quite famously says, "Strange, isn't it? Each man's life touches so many other lives. When he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole, doesn't he?" So let's do a little exercise. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to actually think about the following. Think about a time in your life when you did something that profoundly affected someone else's life or a group of people's lives. It could have been paying for college for your niece because her parents were in a challenging place. It could have been volunteering at a hospice and lovingly being with the dying in their final days. It could have been like Clarence the angel, having a deep and meaningful conversation with a friend at the moment when they were full of despair and maybe even considering suicide. So let's take a moment. Just close your eyes. You don't have to write anything down. I just want you to think about a time when you had an effect on someone else or a group of people in a way that actually may have slightly or in a major way altered their life. So just ponder it for a moment. Okay, you can open your eyes again. And I'm gonna do another swerve on you, Carrie. I'm gonna ask for a couple people to volunteer to tell their story. And then imagine what if you hadn't been there to help that person? So anybody want to volunteer and give us?
It's certainly easier if you guys want to just do the raise your hand. It's easier for me to see that.
Yeah.
So, okay, Sybil, I'm going to let you go ahead and go first. Sybil, just take yourself off of mute.
Oh my gosh.
And be
Okay,
brief,
right
and then we have Joshua second, and so we'll just do the two of you, and just be brief. Thank you, Sybil. From
Well, thank you so
coming
much.
to us from Frankfurt, from
Woo!
Germany.
Everybody, hi, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it happened recently. We had an apartment to rent, and I was just hoping and praying that we could rent it, and we rented it to a woman who has 3 children with autism, and they're Romanian, and there would have been no way that they would have been able to come here and live here. And her husband. And in that first month that they were here, the husband died. And we were able to help them through that process. So it was quite remarkable, and it has changed my life forever, and also theirs.
Wow.
So that was a moment.
Thank you. That is beautiful. What if Sybil didn't exist? Where would they be now? Joshua.
I did my I Love You Made Easy Play Shop a year ago at MEA. And one of the participants in the course of the play shop, a woman told a man that I love you. And he said it was the first time that a woman had ever said I love you to him since his wife had died about a decade before. And it opened up a whole new world for him and a heart opening of what was possible.
Thank you, Joshua. I love you, Joshua.
I love you, Chip.
So the thing to consider here is what if? What if Joshua hadn't done that? What if he hadn't posed that? What if Sybil hadn't been there for that Romanian family? What if you'd never come to MEA? You wouldn't be on the ReZoomion now, that's for sure, because we're not allowing non-alums on the ReZoomion, even though there are a handful of you, or a handful of them out there saying, I want to be on there. Although we do have somebody in the room here. I'm not going to bring them up. So welcome to the George Bailey effect. Uh-oh, something just.
You're good, Chip.
Okay, something came on just, but okay, great. Software, it's just a software update. So welcome to the George Bailey effect. The George Bailey effect technique is based upon the idea that by mentally undoing positive effects from your lives, we initially experience a bit of sadness, but also realize that these positive people, events, and experiences do in fact exist, and we appreciate them all the more. So it's like imagining something that happened didn't happen, and what if? What would have happened if you hadn't been there in your own small or big way? So it creates a gratitude for ordinary and mundane parts of our lives that we often take for granted. So implementing this can be simple. This is something you could do with one of your close friends, with a family member, for whomever. Pick a person, a place, or an event from your life that gives you joy and satisfaction. Write down some things that may have prevented it from happening. That's the what if. Then, as vividly as possible, imagine what your life would have been like had that person, place, or event never been a part of it. By the way, these, I think in the notes for today, ReZoomion, this will be in the notes, so don't worry if you're trying to feverishly take down notes. So think about it. Think about what is it? What was the what if? What in one study of the George Bailey effect, when couples wrote about the ways in which their lives would have been different if they had never met their spouse, this exercise had a greater impact on their happiness than when they reflected on what they really appreciated about their husband or wife. So Carrie Henley, we'll hear from Carrie and Stephen later today. They both came to MEA and were in the same cohort. What if one of the other, and Carrie was supposed to come to one earlier in the year. She had to cancel because she had to be there for her daughter. What if? What if? We love you, Carrie. We love you, Stephen. In essence, this is a way to develop gratitude. And it's a way to create the courage for generosity. Gratitude and generosity. I feel like I'm a preacher right now. I feel like, okay, chips at the pulpit. Gratitude and generosity, we all could use a little more of these right now, couldn't we? Just consider asking yourself, what if a little more often? You have a more profound impact on others than you ever even imagined. So in the past, I've actually taken this exercise and I've taken it into the corporate world. It's a funny little story, and then I'm going to wrap up in a moment. I've introduced this idea of the what if to companies. I'll never forget when I was leading an all-day workshop for the CEO of Gap, all the Gap brands, and his senior leadership team. And I didn't tell him I was going to say this at the start of the workshop, and he was sort of mad at me later that I brought it up, but he said it was really helpful. I said, okay, so this was a dozen years ago. It included the leaders of Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, and all their other brands, all in one room, about 20 people. I asked them the following simple question to start the day. How would the world be a lesser place if Gap and its brands no longer existed? Sadly, crickets. To be honest with you, they had a really hard time answering that, because in some ways, Gap was a very relevant brand in the 60s and 70s. The Fisher family created something, made jeans very cool. But at some point, that brand and the collection and the company overall became irrelevant. The what if question for them, what if we didn't exist as a company, didn't mean much. That's a great question for any company to ask themselves. And I'm not sure that Gap ever figured out a solution to that one. So I'll be honest that there are moments recently in which I have felt a little bit like George Bailey, just to be vulnerable for a moment. There's, not that we're going through the Great Depression yet, but we might be. No World War II to deal with, but that film, at the start of the film, has the backdrop of the Spanish flu. and that pandemic. So it would be easy at times to give up, everything that we do here at MEA, close for good, because frankly, it's costing us a lot of money to keep staff on board. Tell the staff we can't pay them anymore, and tell you alums that we can't do ReZoomions, we can't do weekly mastery weeks, we can't do Wisdom Well, we can't have Saul and Teddy do their things just because we can't afford it. So the generosity of spirit that comes from this exercise of what if reminds me and Christine and Jeff and all of us at MEA why we still do this. We do this because the what if we weren't here, could be, I don't want to say tragic because that's taking it way too far, but sad for sure. We wouldn't all know each other and we wouldn't have this connection. Mark Twain once wrote, "The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you figured out why." I know my why right now is to help MEA become a catalyst for midlife wisdom schools around the world. And it is so weird. Last night, I was watching The Crown with Oren here in this very room. It's the third season of Netflix, The Crown, and we saw Prince Philip, and some of you have seen this, I think. You saw Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, going through something like a midlife crisis in the last part of the 60s, and he helped create what was called St. George's House at Windsor Castle, which has as its mission affecting change for the better by nurturing wisdom. I didn't know this till last night. We're not the first midlife wisdom school. Prince Philip called it that he was going through the drip, drip, drip of doubt. And many of us right now are going through that drip, drip, drip of doubt. Maybe it was British royalty that created the first midlife wisdom school just a couple years after Canadian psychologist Elliot Jakes coined the term midlife crisis. But if you stay curious, you might just learn something new every day. It's hard to imagine my life today without MEA existing. I believe the world would be a lesser place without it. So as Winston Churchill said during World War II, when you're going through hell, just keep going. Or we can learn from Viktor Frankl, whose Man's Search for Meaning book really can be distilled down to despair equals suffering minus meaning. When you're going through challenges, figure out how to find the meaning, because it actually helps to reduce the despair. So today we have a bunch of heady content, heart-filled connection, hell-raising dancing. You're going to be connecting with new alums that you haven't met before. You'll see some that you have met and you're reconnecting with them. And hopefully we're going to remind you a little bit about what it was like when you came face to face with your why, possibly when you were here in Baja. And your what if you had never come here? This is a time to reflect and ask big questions. It's about, it's a time to ask for your calling to be revealed and take dictation. MEA isn't so much about solving your midlife crisis. It's helping you to find your midlife calling. And maybe it's time for you to realize that you can live forever. And that's not because there's a pill we're going to give you, but it's because of what Mark Friedman's going to talk about this afternoon. The idea of having a legacy and passing that on to another collection of people. So let me just, I'm going to bid you adieu now, because you'll see me at other times during the day. I'll be in one of the breakouts, and Jeff and Christine and I, right after lunch, will give you a summary of what we've learned from the alumni survey. 333 of you actually filled it out. Oh my God, and it's really long. Thank you. But let me just say that, well, it's different here without you. It's not the same. We're still here for you. And MEA will still be here for you. And we hope that the emotional insurance that we can offer you, you can offer to each other, to your families, and a little bit of emotional and financial insurance to us as well.
and so pleased that she agreed to lead us through this session. I think we have a real treat on our hands in the next 30 minutes. Just as a background, Isidra is originally from Spain. She did her PhD in Spanish and Latin American literature. Some of my favorite authors are in Latin American literature at UC Berkeley. And then she taught there for 10 years, both Spanish language, literature, movies, and creative writing. She's published 2 books, numerous essays. Her piece, My Books and I, was listed as a notable essay in Best American Essays Anthology, published in October of 2019. She has just finished a memoir, and talking to her about memoir writing and the value that it brings to ourselves and the way that we reflect, we'll get into that, but it's been really illuminating for me to spend time with Isidra talking about reciting. Her memoir talks about her journey from repression to liberation, mirroring Spain's journey from dictatorship to democracy. And very exciting, I was on a call with her a few weeks ago when her book was accepted by a literary agent for review, which is a very big step. And there was a lot of cheering in the Zoom room for her to know that happened. I know it's quite a vulnerable process, and it's thrilling to see you get recognized, and we all can't wait for that to be published someday. We know it's going to happen. You can find her at isidramencos.com. We'll email that to you after, on her reflections about living with purpose and accepting your whole self. You can subscribe to her newsletter if you like, and it is a beautiful newsletter. I will vouch for that. Isidra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Christine, for the great presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully I can, so that we can start doing that. Oh, the host disabled attendee screen sharing. So can maybe Leslie,
if I can let you in. I just like to say one thing that I think that everyone over the last few weeks has probably thought.
Well, there's Leslie.
My phone's blowing up. I can't keep up with the text.
Leslie, can you please, I can't share my screen. Could you make me share it?
Oh, of course. Just
thank you.
I'm making you co-host. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, perfect.
Can you try that?
Yeah.
So there we go. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, here we go.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. How do I do that thing to just show one speaker here? Maybe.
I think you want to go with
speaker one. Yeah, there we are. Perfect. Okay. Christine, I think you have some questions for me.
I do have some questions for you. You started writing fiction, or was it friction?
Both.
Writing fiction, but you currently write memoir and personal essays. Why, Isidra, did you change genres?
Yes. You know, it came a point in my life where I realized that I needed to look back and understand a few things, like, for example, the traumas that I had lived through my childhood, the self-destructive behaviors that I had done during my youth. Also kind of understand the mistakes that I had made and forgive myself for them. And I couldn't do it in fiction. I needed to do it in memoir. And the reason for that is that when you do memoir, you're not just telling a story from your past, but you're also reflecting on that story. And you're using the wisdom that you have accumulated to muse, that's why you call it in memoir, musing over your past story. So I fought that with tooth and nail because I came from fiction. My first book was a book of short stories. I didn't really want to have to do, I don't know why I have you in the screen instead of myself, but let's do this. Okay. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so I needed to reflect on my life. And as a memoirist, that's what you're doing. You're bringing meaning to your life. You're not just telling a story, you're reflecting about your story and explaining how it went and what you learned. And even though at the beginning I didn't want to do that, as I learned more about memoir writing, and then I read a lot of memoirs, I realized that as a reader, I was looking for those nuggets of wisdom when I was reading memoirs. So that's why I went to memoir.
You said something to me in a conversation about using your current set of, basically the current set of tools that you have now to almost reprocess the experiences that you had earlier in life, that you could use memoir to actually utilize and deploy wisdom now. So you could take the tools that you've learned along the way and maybe reframe the experiences, be them traumatic or otherwise.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about the power of what you know now and applying that to who you were then?
Yes, I have to say that the writing this memoir was such a layered process, because as I wrote more and more, I started seeing things about my life that I hadn't seen before. And it really was a process of digging into the meaning of my life, understanding why things went the way they went. And also, it really entailed a lot of forgiveness, forgiving myself. You have a lot of wisdom now, and we all do as modern elders, that we didn't have when we were 20, we didn't have when we were 5. So as we grew up, sometimes we experience some traumas, and then that trauma created a belief, like, I don't know, my mother doesn't love me or whatever. But then when you start exploring your life and reflecting about it and going really deep on it, oftentimes you realize that that actually is not a belief, it's a misbelief, because that's how you interpret what happened when you were 5 or when you were 8 or when you were 18. And now with the wisdom of time and your life experiences, you can go back and understand much more about what really happened, and relate it in a way that is a lot more complex, and throw in there in that memoir those musings that I don't know if you can see here, this quote from Judith Barrington about musing in memoir, which is so necessary, which is those nuggets of wisdom of interpreting the past with your new tools that you have today.
One more question along these lines. You said that you realized that you read memoir differently once you started writing memoir, that you enjoyed kind of those self-reflective nuggets in different ways. So do you feel that memoir writing not only helps you understand yourself better, but makes you maybe even a better, more empathetic human?
I think so, because I think one of the key things for memoirists is when you're writing about your past, you may have gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of issues, and there may have been people that hurt you, but everybody has dark and lightness in them. And when you go through this process of memoir writing and you go really deep, you're not out there for revenge. You are out there for understanding. And so when you are going after that understanding, I think that's what really brings this capacity to look at life in a more complex way and understand that nobody's perfect. They hurt you, you've hurt others. We are all in this together, and we're just going through this process of life, trying to learn how to be a better person, right? And that, to me, definitely reading and writing memoir has helped me be a better person and a wiser person.
Thank you for letting me dig into that, Isidra. I know that's a little bit more than we had discussing around memoir, but I really get so inspired every time I hear you talk about this. I know that we want to give everyone in this workshop some real tools and some exercises to do, so we'll move towards that. Can you tell us why you think it's important to, or do you think it's important actually, to write an outline of a book, a story, or an essay before starting to write?
Well, you know, there's 2 schools of thoughts on that. One is the pantsers, which write by the seat of their pants. They don't plan anything. And the other are the plotters, the ones that like to plot, you know, their story, their essay, their book very carefully. Stephen King, for example, says that he's a pantser. He doesn't plan anything. He just sits down and lets the inspiration take him wherever. I tend to be more of a pantser, but I have learned a lot about tools for plotting my stories, my books, and I have found some of those tools very, very useful. So I wanted to give everybody a few tools that may be useful for them. I don't know. Well, anyway, one is the whiteboard. I learned this from Joyce Maynard, a well-known novelist. I took a one-week workshop with her, and she plots every one of her stories in a whiteboard before she starts writing it. And what she does is she breaks the big page into two, and on the right hand, she puts the elements, and that she throws in there everything but the kitchen sink, anything that may be related to a story idea that she has, everything. It can be very messy. It doesn't matter. Anything related to your story or to your topic, just put it in there. Then on the left side, you start to organize it a little bit. And how do you do that? Well, you try to, let me see if I can do this. That would probably be a lot better. Yes, thank you. Goodness, sorry guys that I had it in the small thing. I don't know why I did that. But here is the brainstorm that can be really, really messy. On the left side, you can put your theme. The theme is really, really important because otherwise what you're writing can go all over the place and you can lose yourself and lose the reader. One thing that can help is use the sentence, I used to, but now, because stories are about a transformation. It's about how you change or the people around you change or the town changes or the situation changes. It doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. There's always some type of internal or external transformation in an engaging story. So that's why I put this here, I used to, but now. That can be helpful when you're thinking about your theme. And then you can kind of have to build your narrative arc, you know, the beats of your story. The beats would be kind of like the key scenes that carry your story forward. Very usually you will have a build up to the story, a climax, and some type of resolution. I'm going to show you an example that I did with a story of mine. You can see it's very messy. The story was entitled The Dress. It was about a very sexy dress that I used to have and I used to love, but that then all of a sudden I didn't love it anymore. Why? I'm going to explain in the story the why, but this is what I did. I put here all the elements pell-mell, very messy. I tried to figure out my narrative arc. I came on the theme. The dress was only a container, what you call a container. So it was like, you're talking about a dress, but the story is not about the dress. The story is about a theme. And what is the theme? I summarize it here by saying, I am not my dress. I may love the dress. The dress is sexy, makes me a magnet for men or whatever, but I am not the dress, right? So after this very messy one, I did a more organized one. And then when I went and wrote the story, it was really easy to write. I had all the elements. I had my narrative arc. It was just so easy to do. And it actually got published in a literary journal. I sent it 2 weeks after it got published. Okay, let me get to the next slide. This is another way, let me make this smaller. Another way to think about plot. The algorithm. This is an algorithm that Marion Roach-Smith, who teaches memoir writing and essays and personal essays and just narrative essays, always talks about. It's a story about X as illustrated by Y to be told in Z. Why is that important? That is important because you have to have a very clear theme. X is the theme that your story is about. And as I said before, if your theme is not clear, you're bound to be going all over the place. You may be 200 pages into a book and all of a sudden say, I don't even know what this book is about. You know, I'm lost. I got lost. Imagine how the reader is gonna get lost. Then you have Y, which is the actual story that illustrates the theme. So in the case of the dress, my theme was power is internal. It's not your look. It's not your dress. It is something that you have inside yourself. The actual story was the story of that dress. And then the media where it will appear. Are you writing a book? Are you writing for a podcast? Are you writing a personal essay? Are you writing a narrative essay, a how-to book? Depending what you're writing is going to be completely different. So you have to always be thinking about that writing. Okay, a third way Oh, sorry, I jumped one slide. A third way of thinking about plot is thinking about the what and the how, or the what and the why. And this is actually very helpful for reflection about your writing, because a story is not just what happens, but it's about how it changes you, or about why something that happened was actually important. And that is the same for, it doesn't matter if it's memoir or if it is a nonfiction narrative book, if it's fiction, whatever it is, whatever you're writing about is really not just about the facts. It's about why those facts matter, either because they brought a transformation and simply because they were really important for the story. So then what you can do to reflect about your story before you even write it is you can do a 2-tier outline. And you do chapter 1, what happened or what's happening in this chapter, 2 lines, just the plot, what's happening there. And then the second tier is how it changed me, or how it changed others, or how it changed the situation, whatever the story is about, or why it is important. So you have to do this outline for every chapter, and it's just 1 page. 1 line for the what happens, 1 line for why is this important, or what change it brought. And you do it every time. And very important thing, that also allows you to see if every chapter is clearly related to your theme, and if it's advancing the story towards that climax and that resolution. So that 2-tier outline can be very, very good, and it really brings up a lot of reflection.
But we also do want to say, right, that there are 2 very different ways. There are pantsers and there are plotters.
Exactly, exactly.
Tool for plotters, or if you're a pantser, maybe you want to try plotting. You know, we're in strange times. Maybe you try on a new way of working.
That's a very good point, Christina. As I said, I'm more of a pantser than a plotter.
I love these things. I just wanted
What happened to me is I wrote my memoir, and when I was in the middle of my memoir, I was like, I don't even know where I'm going with this memoir. I was going nuts. You know, it was just like I got blocked. And so then that's when I went back and I did a lot of that outlining to make sure I knew where I wanted to go by the end of the book. So it depends. You can use the tools when you need them, but you don't need to be shackled by the tools either.
I love what you have to say about the medium too, and considering the medium. I think that's, as a pantser, as like a super pantser, I'm never thinking about where it's going. I'm never thinking about where, you know, I'm in what format it will be. So I like the idea of having tools in another situation.
And you can actually use one theme in many different mediums. So for example, you know, an example from Marion Roach Smith, which I mentioned before, she wrote a book about how she took care of her mother who had Alzheimer's, right? And when she published that book, there wasn't a whole lot about Alzheimer's in the market, so it was very successful. Since then, that was more than a decade ago, she has talked about this story in radio interviews, in podcasts, in small personal essays, in big non-narrative, non-fiction essays. She is really used that story or that theme in many different ways, you know, the why in her algorithm, for many different media, which is the Z in the algorithm. So thinking about things that way really opens your mind to, you do not need to come up with new things every day. You have a few obsessions that you're gonna be going back over and over again. And just if you think about how am I gonna illustrate this theme in a different way for these different media, it's gonna open up a lot of doors for you.
Isidra, what do you say about letting people write? Are y'all ready to do some writing?
Oh yeah, I don't know if, I just wanted to give a little piece of advice before we go into prompts for writing. And I would like for you guys to use a pen and paper if you can, instead of the computer when we go to the prompts. But before we get there, just very quickly, write every day. Write every day. It's very important, even if it's 5 minutes. If you're working on a long project like a book or an essay, even if you write just 5 minutes, the fact that you're touching that work every day is going to keep it in your subconscious, and it's going to be working for you without you even noticing. You're going to be walking the dog and pop, something is going to pop in your mind, and you're going to know the ending of a chapter that was giving you trouble. Also, write before you start writing. Write in your head. Sometimes it takes me weeks, months, even years to put a story to paper that's been dancing around in my head. So that's very important, that pre-writing reflection. If you don't know what to write, write morning pages. Sit down with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just let yourself go. Maybe you do it 10 minutes, or you want to do it 10 minutes, and half an hour later, you're like, oh my God, where did the time go? And you enter that state of flow that is so joyful. Fight resistance. We all feel resistance to creating something new. It's risky, but you need to fight it, because when you risk and when you go to something new and you push yourself to create and to write, you're gonna get to know yourself better, and you're gonna find more meaning in your life and bring it to your reader. So keep writing. And now, Jen, let's go to the prompts, Christine.
Let's go to the prompts, but I do want to add, one of the concepts that we talk about at the Academy is using meditation as almost a mental hygiene. Just like you would brush your teeth every day, we go to meditation as a way to calm the mind. And I love this notion that you've brought us to with the morning pages or the everyday writing as just another form of mental hygiene. It's just another tool to put in the toolkit. So thank you for framing it for me that way.
Absolutely. And sometimes I meditate when I'm having trouble with a story. I will meditate before I start writing, and it helps.
All right, so talk us through these prompts as we
Yes. So how much time do we have, Christine? Do we have time for two?
We've got
Not that
about
much? Okay, so I have 4 prompts. If we only have about 10 minutes left, let's choose one of the 4. I'm gonna show you this first one, and then I'm gonna show you the other 2. You can choose one of the 4 and then just write for about 3 to 4 minutes. And then at the end, we'll ask if somebody wants to share what they're writing. Just let yourself go, don't think, just do it spontaneously. So you can choose either the first time which incidentally is the first few words of Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. The last time or the other ones are, tell me something about silence, what it means to you, or when it has oppressed you, or what it means in your family. And the 4th one is, what have you held on to for too long? So please choose one of the prompts, write for a few minutes, don't get your pen off the paper, just write, and we'll ask somebody to share.
And I'll give you 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when it's time to stop. So go ahead and start writing. All right, and if we can start to wrap up, as in pick your pencils up. Oh, I always wanted to be a teacher. I got to just say it like a high school teacher. Trisha Guthrie, pick your pencil up, please. Thank you. All right, and I believe that Isidra, if anyone was comfortable and wanted to share back, we were going to make that space available now. Isidra, you are going to have to identify who that is, I believe, as the co-host.
Okay, so if anybody wants to share, do you want to raise your hand? I'm going to be going, okay, we have Lance over here who wants to share, so I'm going to unmute you, Lance.
Me?
Thank
Okay.
you for sharing.
Okay. So I chose the Tell Me Something About Silence. In 1994 or so, on the way to Sundance, I stopped my car to sit down and meditate. Something arises here about a washing machine. I think it was a dream I had about this gorgeous red-headed woman I was secretly in love with, though I was already married, soon to be divorced. One day she came to me and asked me to marry her. I was stunned. Then she continued telling me she wanted me to perform her wedding ceremony to marry another man. Anyway, I sat to meditate by the side of a river when suddenly I heard a sound in the silence. It was the first time I had tinnitus.
Oh, wow. Very nice, Lance. Do we have another person who wants to share? Just raise your hand. I'm going to go to the second screen. And I have Wendy Garfield over here. I'm going to unmute you, Wendy.
Okay, I very rarely write. So thank you for the prompt. So my prompt was, what have I held on too long? My anger has been with me for all of my life. I'm very accustomed to the feeling of it. It percolates. I now try to calm it down. I now know to remove myself before exploding on those I love. I still cannot tease out all of its tentacles that capture my brain and heart, but I know they are not hearkening to the rational, loving sources of myself. They are calling back the old, insecure, deprived habits of my past. Now I sit in silence before speaking to anyone to avoid the enormous storm.
Wow. I don't know about all of you, but I have so missed sharing with people like this. I've been on lots of Zoom calls and lots of well-intentioned educational sessions, but Lance, Wendy, thank you so much for sharing those. I also want to acknowledge how exciting it is with how terrifically wrong those last two moments could have gone. And how wonderful they both were. So thank you. Isidra, let's see, what do we have time-wise?
I had somebody, Jay, I think, that wanted to write. I'm trying to locate it. I mean, to read. I'm trying to locate it on the screen.
Okay, we have time for the one last.
There it is. I see you. I see you.
All right.
Hi. So
And
this
can
is
I
my
just
first
jump in
time.
really quick, Christine, Isidra? I'm sorry, but we have a little extra time because of that little tech snafu. So we've got another 5 minutes.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, good shares.
Go ahead, Jay.
It's my first time, so I thought I would do it in a trusted space. I chose silence. Silence is a space where my family's history lies. My father never wanted to discuss the past, only the future. My mother, the opposite. For him, the past was all about the humiliations that he went through. A proud, handsome, intelligent man who had to make his way in this new country. The future was opportunity, and the present a reflection of all his accomplishments as a new immigrant in the American story. His trifecta of 3 kids who went to Harvard, his World Series of Poker bracelet, and his brick house with the roof that was built to last 100 years. For her, it was the past, to hold on to the memories of all those who had suffered and been left behind. The baby half-brother who had been buried in the backyard after her stepfather kicked her mother in the stomach at 7 months, causing her to miscarry. The present and the future she did not want to talk about because those people she holds on to are gone.
Wow. I just want to say, guys, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing, but also just notice you just wrote for 3 minutes and look what came up in 3 minutes. This deep deep things for each of the three people that read. It is just so amazing that thinking that only 5 minutes a day can get out of you these incredible truths that perhaps you've been burying. I even have like my whole hairs stood up on my arms. It's like, it's just amazing. So the power of giving yourself that moment of reflecting, or not reflecting, just putting pen to paper and write and see what you have inside that you haven't listened to is so important. The world needs that truth and that vulnerability.
Thank you, Isidra. So I think we have some prompts going forward for anyone who is interested.
Yes.
So if you would like to receive a series of 7 prompts, we're gonna do 1 a day for the next week. Is that right, Isidra?
Yeah, I send 7. Yeah.
Please send me an email, Christine@modernelderacademy.com, and I will make us a mailing list, and we will have a prompt a day, and we'll figure out a way to share them back, because that was really beautiful and vulnerable. I'm honored that everyone shared the way they did. Isidra, I can't thank you enough. You're
very welcome. Do we have any more minutes, or are we all done? I just want to.
We've got 2 more minutes.
All right.
Just if anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself for a moment and ask it, or raise your hand, or I can't. There's so many screens I'm trying to see.
Lisa, clever.
Yeah, hi. I love what you're saying. So when you have too much information and you have you said you got drowned by all the writing that you had, you didn't know, then you figured out a way to organize it. What are some of the things you do when you have something? I have things on one computer and on another, and papers, printed out from years, and then I get lost in the editing.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest with that?
Are you talking about different projects, or all about the same project?
The same project, but how do you keep writing but also be creative with when you really do have to edit, when you've written so much and you have to figure out where everything is?
That's a great question, because it happens, especially if you're working over a few years on one project, like a book, right? So I use different methods. One of the things that I recommend is, if you get rid of things, passages, pages, chapters, don't delete them. Have another folder of outtakes, because you may use that later on for another story, or you realize that you were missing that piece and you bring it back into the book. So that's number 1. Have a folder of outtakes. Other things I've done, for example, is spreadsheets. I have so many spreadsheets, but like when I got a little lost with my memoir, I actually have a spreadsheet because it has a big historical context. So I had the chapter, I had what happens on the chapter, I had why this is important, I had the historical context for the chapter. So I really got very organized. I even had like themes in tags so that I could quickly look for themes and where they are in the book to think about the overall structure. So I think I have about 10 or 12 drafts of that memoir. So each draft is a different name, different dates. I just don't get confused, because it's very easy when you're working over so much time. But those are some of the things that I've used to get organized. And definitely from time to time, you just need to print it and go with the pencil and start making notes and get organized with paper, because it's different than just looking digitally.
Yeah, that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
all right.
First of all, thank you guys for coming over. We have a good group. I'm excited to run through this. We only have 30 minutes, so it's going to be fairly compressed. As we begin to speak and think, find yourself a pen and some paper, because we need you to do some journaling and processing for yourself while we're going through this. We don't have time for breakouts, but we do have time for some interesting discussion. The general theme that we wanted to explore was how big life transitions and liminality can be transformed by AI, appreciative inquiry. This is there's sort of 2 aspects of this, which is sort of just the general process of AI, and then specifically how you can use AI on yourself to help yourself and to help yourself process some of the big transitional or liminal questions that you're going through in your life right now. If you have questions through the course of our event, post them in the chat. We'll hopefully be able to field them either in process, or we'll field them at the end of the discussion between Chris and I. Which brings me to Chris Murchison. Chris has been participant teacher. He's written in our workbook. He's been advisor and has been pretty much a coach on what appreciative inquiry is to me, and then onwards to the entire community. It's become a core part of our offering at MEA, and it's been really transformational, as many of you know, for me personally, but also for the broader community in terms of how do you ask a good catalytic question. Chris is a consultant, a creative thought partner for many businesses around the Bay Area and around the world. He's a coach for positive organizational practices, an experienced designer, and looks at organizational change processes and how to truly shift organizations. We are honored and privileged to have you here, Chris. And I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you, Carrie. I'm just in love with this topic of appreciative inquiry and have been for many, many, many years. And I've always believed that questions, that there's a power, an innate power in questions and the kinds of questions that we ask ourselves and ask each other that support us kind of being our best. And so I still feel like I'm a student of questions and a student of appreciative inquiry. It's something that I think I will continue to want to refine as a practice for myself. And I know that the Academy as well is looking for just ways to continue to have this content in the Academy and to continue to refine it over time, because it's just so important. Really quickly, just to do a quick refresher on kind of what is this thing called appreciative inquiry. And so for me, this comes out of a kind of a context of positive psychology. And so the rise of positive psychology came out of a belief or a sort of a epiphany that a lot of psychological practices or theories were born out of this idea of looking for problems, essentially. So looking for what was wrong in your childhood or in your growing up years, defining those problems, those issues, and then working with you to address those and mitigate those going into the future. And so one of the founders of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, and some others began to really think about what happens when we actually turn that assumption on its head. And so rather than looking for what's wrong, what would happen in psychological conversations if we actually start asking about what's going well, kind of looking for the bright spots, looking at what's positive, and what might be activated with that kind of an inquiry rather than a deficit kind of inquiry. What they began to find is that by focusing on the positive, the appreciative, the generative kinds of inquiry in sessions, that they were finding that clients were able to actually see possibilities in the future. They were energized by those possibilities. They were actually able to heal better, if you will, to kind of get over trauma or challenges and move towards something that was much more future focused and positive in that future as well. And also the discovery that future focus and that positive focus helped people unlock kind of natural innate resources that they had inside of them, kind of a natural wisdom that existed inside of them that they could actually tap into and use to support their resilience and use to support them aspiring towards that future possible self. And so that's, I think, what birthed the idea of appreciative inquiry as a practice largely used to support people during times of change. And so AI was born to support individuals and groups and even whole organizations or movements think about, what's the best possible future that we can imagine for what we are hoping to achieve, and how do we ask questions that help that future realize itself. So that's just a quick refresher on kind of what AI is. I think during our liminal times that bring us to MEA, being aware of the questions that we are each holding or sitting with becomes the kind of ripe territory for discovery and exploration.
Okay. So Chris, we were thinking that maybe we'd actually use this as a sort of a living lab for people to run through their own questions and sort of kind of constitute what it is to ask a good question and what it is to be a good listener. So maybe you want to set us up with some prompts so that we can all think about a question that would work for us, that we can actually work through collectively.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll take a couple of minutes to just write those down. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So in appreciative inquiry, they often talk about like, what's the topic of the inquiry? So I think for our first assignment, if you could just for a couple of minutes, think about your own experience in this liminal space and think about like, what's something you're sitting with, something you're curious about that might become the topic of some inquiry. So for me, as an example, one of the liminal space that I'm sitting in is, where do I want to live? Where do I want to be in this next phase of my life as a modern elder? And what I'm thinking about that place being Europe, but I have a lot of questions around where and if that is actually the right place for me. So that could be my topic for inquiry. But so what would be your topic, or something that you're kind of sitting with in this liminal space that could become the focus of some inquiry?
We'll take a couple of minutes and I will let you guys know when we come back. So use the time to just journal into your question that you're particularly interested in thinking about over the next 30 minutes. Okay, hopefully you found something to think about. Maybe take a last couple of seconds just to finish off. So Chris, let's break down the anatomy of a good question. Let's start to think about what it is that makes a good question. When you talk about this work, you often talk about mindsets that support good inquiry. What do you mean by that? What is a good mindset for appreciative inquiry? What is a mindset for appreciative inquiry?
So, well, for me, I mean, the core word here is inquiry, and I think appreciative is a descriptor of that action or that practice. And so one mindset, I think, with inquiry is sort of the appreciative mindset. And so, how do you ask questions in a way that are designed to open someone up, maybe to appreciate what is working. If I were asking questions of you, Jeff, about your topic, they might be questions that allow me to appreciate where you are right now in your life with this question. So I think there's kind of just an appreciation of the moment, appreciation of you, and asking questions that allow you to appreciate the good and also what's possible for the future. I think there's also, and we talk a lot about growth mindset in MEA, as you all know, and so I think there's also probably in here kind of a growth mindset associated with inquiry. So for example, in growth mindset, the opposite of growth mindset is being so sort of tied to the outcome that you're just driving towards kind of the finished outcome or the kind of what you think is sort of the performative behavior rather than the behavior that's kind of more learning and growing and improvising towards a goal. And so I think in a growth mindset's powerful and appreciative inquiry because you're appreciating that this is a process and that this is a journey. And so how do you help someone have the mindset that there's a lot to learn along the way that's just as powerful as getting maybe to the result. I think, yeah.
Keep going.
I was gonna say, I think energy. Energy. I think is a mindset, a positive energy. I want to say, like a sense of positivity. Sort of really, the brain can sometimes get in this negative loop or default, and so I think intentionally thinking about bringing positive energy or positive mindset to inquiry is also really powerful. And also knowing that that positivity can be infectious and can really support the person or the topic to kind of move into that positive framing rather than kind of looking at what's wrong or what might get in the way.
So if I kind of play back some of these core factors of the right mindset, there is a mindset and it is around inquiring, and an inquiry is somewhere where you're truly curious, right? You're looking for answers. You're not knowing the answer. You are exploring, so that it's exploratory. The word appreciative, you were sort of saying, is that there's a sort of positivity. There's a like what could be that into the growth mindset, into the journey that you might be able to take, and this sort of positive energy. In your experience, Chris, is that how people ask themselves questions?
Probably not always. Which is just being human, I think. I think I find myself, sometimes stuck in this negative loop, and my questions can just, they almost build upon themselves. Like the negative feeds more negative, it feeds more negative, and so I have to catch myself in that kind of downward spiral, and sort of intentionally shift kind of upwards with intentional. Bringing in an intentional mindset of positivity and appreciation. And I can do it, and I have done it during this pandemic. There are times when I was just like, look at my calendar for the upcoming week and see that I have, 30 Zoom meetings. And I just, and I'll just freak out, like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is stressing me out already. And so, one Monday morning, a week ago, I looked at my calendar and it's completely full with Zoom meetings. And I thought, okay, well, let me just take a breath. And I kind of put on a mindset of, okay, how can I think about this more positively or with curiosity? And when I did that, I realized that, well, actually, these meetings are with people that I like. None of these meetings are necessarily stressful or hard. Sure, there are many of them, but it's not like, they're not bad. And it actually allowed me to enjoy the week and go through the week with a lot more energy, which was really wonderful. Yeah.
So I'm going to propose that we go into another minute or so journaling, which is review the mindset of the question you asked yourself. In light of the discussion we've just had, this sort of micro discussion around having this kind of positive energy and positive mindset towards the discussion, think about the question that you just asked yourself and think about the mindset that you had associated with your question. Is there a way that you might choose to shift that mindset now that you've just had some thoughts about how, the energy you put into a question influences the outcome of it? Just take a minute and then we'll jump to the next.
You might think of this as like you kind of named a topic, a thing that you wanted to focus on, that you are focused on at this time, in this liminal time. So you might imagine yourself at the center of your own inquiry. And so what questions would you ask of yourself? And what mindset would you bring?
Okay, so let's wrap that section up.
Let me just give an example, Jeff. Would that help?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So as I just quickly mentioned earlier that I'm considering a move to Europe, and my mindset, I have several mindsets as I approach this. I realized some of it, I've had a bit of an anxiety mindset about, oh my gosh, there are so many details to figure out, and like when do we go and how do we go, and etc. But when I actually kind of really put on an appreciative hat and a curiosity hat, I realized that my questions shift from kind of how questions, or the how and the when and the what questions, to kind of deeper, more juicy questions about like who do I want to become in this new life, and what are the conditions that I might create or that will support me in becoming the kind of person that I want to be, or to have the impact that I really want to have. Maybe like, what am I leaving behind, or what am I letting go of in order to make this happen? And so, when I really put on that curiosity hat and that appreciative hat, such much more interesting questions start surfacing. And I think those questions will ultimately take care of the how and the when and the what questions later on.
And it connects to this idea of purpose, right? So rather than getting caught up in the needs, get caught up in the ends of what you're, where you're going. You went to a Quaker college, right?
I did.
Right, as a kid. And so literally from your earliest education, you've been taught about what it is to ask a good question. There are rubrics that the Quakers give out in this area. Can you talk to us about what is a good question? What makes a good question?
Yeah, so Quakers are amazing at inquiry, and there's a process called the Clearness Committee. We'll send out a link to this document explaining it, but it's kind of similar to the appreciative inquiry circle that we do in MEA. So the idea is that a volunteer would bring a topic to a group, and then that group would sit with them and basically ask them questions to help them discern the answer to their own question. And the process is a very powerful one, and their inquiry is framed around this idea of open and honest questions. So for example, an open question is one where it's not a closed question, so it's beyond a yes or no question. It's a question that is open and invites someone to really share more and discover more that's in their question. An open question is also one where, as the asker, you don't really know what the answer is. And so it's not a question disguised as advice or disguised as an opinion. It's truly a question that you ask of another or of yourself where you really don't know the answer to it. An honest question is one that is really in support of the other person and support of them unlocking their inner resources. So it's not a question trying to trick them or manipulate them into something that you think they should be doing to help themselves, etc. So those are a few qualities of inquiry that happens in this Quaker practice. But I think another aspect, and someone posted this in the chat box, another aspect of a good question is just being present with someone, being present, like asking the question and being present with the question and with the other person or with yourself to be patient, to allow that question to sit and be absorbed so that the inner wisdom in response to that question can emerge and surface in its own pace. And that might sometimes take some time. You might need to sit on that question for a while, or allow the answers to that question to come and evolve over time as you continue to sit with the question.
In our sort of preparatory discussion, we talked a lot about timing and tone, and is the question open? Is it truly a question? Is it honest?
Yeah.
You added a note. You said, "Is it beautiful?" What does that mean to you?
I love the idea of beauty, and so is the question that gets crafted one that that creates some awe. So I know that Dacher Keltner spoke at one of the MEA alumni sessions, and he does a lot of research around awe, kind of a sense of just being deeply inspired by something or moved. And so does your question move you? Does your question provide some awe for you? You know, is it beautiful? Does it make you curious? Does it make you want to pause and take a deep breath? Does it strike you? I mean, does it make you tilt your head and maybe furrow your brow because it just so strikes you? You know, is it the kind of in the face of the beautiful question that you can't give it a quick answer, that it really requires thought, like thoughtfulness and intention behind it? And so I think, you know, a frame of beauty on questions for me is really particularly provocative and helpful.
So we have about 7 minutes left. So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute. We've been going through a sort of a funnel of sort of themes and potential questions that are going on in your life. What are the 3 questions, or what would be a beautiful question you might ask yourself as you think about this topic that you're wrestling with right now? Chris, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but
I love what you did.
Okay. So take a minute. How might you reframe your theme into a beautiful question? If you don't have time now, maybe this is something you might revisit over the weekend and journal into. It's so provocative thinking about these big transitions we're going through in terms of the beautiful questions that we might ask ourselves. The other thing that kind of surprises us every time is that there is a sort of a contract between questioning and listening, Chris. And one of the things I love to talk. One of the reasons I love talking to you about this type of work is you always bring some new learning to me. And I would love for you to talk about listening and about being a good listener. I know that you've done tons of thinking about this.
Yeah. You know, I like listening and inquiry are necessary partners. I think they have to go together. And so as beautiful as your inquiry is, I think your listening also needs to be beautiful as well. And and in listening, I think it's the opportunity to be present with someone in a way that, again, really supports them in responding to the questions or to the inquiry. And yeah, as we learned in MEA, there are different ways one can listen, some beneficial to this process and some actually distracting to the appreciative inquiry process. And so, you know, there's actually another model of listening that I'll just refer to by Otto Scharmer. We'll pop that into the chat later. But he, you know, similar to the 3 levels of listening that we learned about in MEA, his model has 4 levels, and I'll just share them really quickly as a reference. But at the low end of listening is a kind of listening that he calls downloading, which is really you as a listener. You're not really listening well to the person. You're just listening to their words and comparing it to what you already know. So it's a kind of a rational brain kind of listening for information. And then there's factual listening, where you're listening maybe a little bit more, but you're kind of comparing what you're hearing to what you already know and looking for those differences. And then you kind of shift into what's kind of more in the appreciative realm of listening, which is empathic listening, where you're really then listening with the ability to hear not just the person's words, but kind of hear and feel their experience and kind of understand what they're facing from their own eyes and ears. And then at the highest level, he describes as listening, which is what he calls generative listening, which is probably similar to the whole body listening, level 3 listening that we learned about in MEA. And to me, that's the beautiful listening, I think, has a generative quality to it. So it's really putting your personality aside, like you step away and suddenly you're so present with the other person that you're able to feel kind of what their responses are, what their experience is, and you're able in your listening to see their best possible future self. So there's an opportunity for you to listen so well that you can see what's possible for them and then support them with further inquiry and then further listening that helps them unlock themselves and unlock their inner wisdom to actually begin making movements towards that best possible self. So to me, that's a gorgeous, beautiful process that I think aligns so well with what we want to do in MEA.
I noticed that Tom McCook was in our group, and he's a body guru, and he often tells people that, you know, whatever movement you're making, try to make it beautiful. And I think if I could wrap up everything you've said, Chris, ask beautiful questions, listen beautifully to allow people to arrive at their beautiful self.
That's great.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's great.
We have a minute left.
We do. Yeah. I just want to point out one thing. So Marguerite popped this into the chat box, which I think is brilliant, that sometimes listening is just being silent. And I think that's so true, that in this sort of partnership of listening and inquiry, sometimes being with someone is just being quiet with them and having your presence be almost your beautiful presence with someone might be enough sometimes. That you don't always have to be speaking to inquire, and that silence can actually be quite powerful as well. So thank you, Marguerite.
Chris, you were wondering if anyone had a question they wanted to share with the group. Is there anyone that maybe has a question they'd like to share with the group before we move off? We have about a minute left.
And just to let you know, guys, you have a couple more minutes if you want to. We're going to give you a couple extra spacious minutes because the other groups had some issues getting into their rooms. It's not as tranquil as you two. So you can feel free to take another 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, does anyone, let's use the next 3 or 4 minutes just to sort of think about, or just listening to some of each other's questions. Would anyone like to share, or just reflections on how AI might be helpful?
And it's a small enough group, you can open up your mute. I saw Michelle raising her hand, so I want to go ahead and let Michelle start, but then you can unmute yourself at will. Go ahead, Michelle.
You're on mute, Michelle.
I'm not able to unmute you, Michelle. Unfortunately, you have to do that on your end.
Got it. I said sleepy face here, and forgive me for being sleepy.
It's a beautiful face.
My question, or what comes up for me and what I've been considering a lot lately, is living with compromise to enable the other person, because in that Zen sort of way of not wanting to project change on the other person, but knowing the way they want to live will impact you greatly, and it might be at odds with your own wants and needs. So just, that one.
That's beautiful. I've been thinking, my own experience.
Warren, okay, go ahead, Chris, and then Warren's going to go.
I would say in my own experience, in my own questions, I realized this morning that I was holding something in a kind of yes-no dichotomy, that I either do this thing or not. And I realized that was not very helpful, that there might actually be some in-between options that I wasn't even considering. So yeah, that's really helpful, Michelle.
I think that we have a bunch of questions before we jump to Warren, and then we'll close on you, Warren. But we have a bunch of questions in the chat. The chat keeps on moving. First of all, there's a quote from Liz. Listening is so close to love that most people can't tell the difference. Thank you, Liz. That is a beautiful quote.
That's gorgeous.
Nancy Combs was saying that she struggles with jumping to conclusions. So even in the self-inquiry process, having the patience with yourself to explore is part of what you're suggesting, right, Chris?
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes we can sit with the same or similar question for years. Like, so how do we give it the space and, nurture that question like we would a plant?
Yeah.
Some of us are not good at taking care of plants, but but how do we take care of our questions and nurture them so that we can get to the answers?
Peter Scanlon wanted to know a little bit about where you went. Actually, a couple of people wanted to know about your Quaker school. Where did you go, and how was that education? Like, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, I went to a school called Earlham College, EARLHAM. I actually grew up in a military family, which Nancy Combs knows a lot about, and I didn't come from a Quaker background, didn't know much about Quakerism until I went to a college fair, met this person from the school, and fell in love with their philosophy. Just hands down, it was the only school I applied to. I got in, and I just find the Quaker practices and principles to be very progressive and very powerful.
Okay. Warren Dodge, there's a ton of other questions. I know that some of you haven't been able to link through to the links. Maybe try copying them and then pasting them into your browser if they don't link directly through. If not, we will find out how we can get them to you.
Well, so if I can just break in for one moment, I'll let you guys wrap up because all the rooms are going to be coming back together. So this is the complicated part, is that when you came on this morning, you registered for the reunion, right? And you had a link that was in your email box. That's the link you want to go back to right now. So the link you used to come here is over in about 1 minute. So you want to go back to your email, or if you had it in your calendar, it was confirmation ReZoomion 2020 in your email box, or it was in your calendar. That's the link you want to go find to go back to the main room. So I'll let you two just say thank you and wrap up with your last minute, and then we're going to all do that.
Thank you. Let's wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Let's put it up. That was
Thanks.
beautiful and tranquil and nourishing and delicious and fabulous.
And beautiful.
And beautiful. You guys got the cool, tranquil water. So I'm going to be ending this meeting. So that means that everybody has your instructions. Go back to your original email that put you into the ReZoomion and click it again to come back in. And I'm going to be over there to meet you. Okay?
All right.
Ciao, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Guys,
Thanks, Carrie.
questions.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Chris, you're amazing.
You're amazing,
You are.
Jeff.
You guys are amazing. Okay, I got to end the meeting. Bye.
So Chip, when we were in Baja, and for those of you who don't know me, I went to a cohort that ended on February 23rd, so it was very recent. And near the end of that, there's in our workbook, there's a question about what is wealth. This question came up, and I approached Chip afterwards, and we had a little conversation about this. And I said that the workbook and the fellow who made the contribution, Douglas Soy, he had a really nice piece about all the hangups that we have about money. And I mentioned, well, what's I think missing and what we could talk about was what we could do about money. And that's what launched us into this conversation. And then right after that, COVID hit. And what that's done for me, and I think for everybody I've been talking with, and everybody that I've spent my career working with, is brought into question, what do we value more than money? So I'll share this real briefly as background. Those people in my cohort know this, but I was a financial advisor, started in 1984, and been at this for a long time. Fast forward, because of the last recession, I went from a net worth that was in an 8-figure net worth to a minus 8-figure net worth through a series of events in my life. But that caused me to really look at what money is and what it means. And I think coming out of that, there are times where I miss the money, but the wisdom gained from that, I think, has led to this in a way that I could never have imagined. So I'm quite grateful for it. And so from that has emerged this train of thought, which is, as a result of COVID-19, what do you now realize that you care about more than money? And to me, that conjures up a bunch of things. I think Diane Johnson mentioned that just in our sharing previously about caring. I think that it brings to fore a lot of our things that come to mind when we practice gratitude for the things we still have. So what I'm going to talk about here real briefly is gratitude. And I'm going to go through this quickly since we don't have a lot of time, but this model is a model that I use in my work. And just as a side comment, I had planned originally to do another workshop a week from today to go into these things a little bit more. Now that's going to become a bit of a necessity because of just circumstances, but I invite any of you who are interested in these things to join me again next week, and we'll go into this in more detail. But very briefly, this green triangle is what we use for gratitude. It begins with respect.
Ron, we can't see your at least I can't see your deck yet. So.
Correct. Yep, we can just see your Zoom screen. So you might want to, if you can get to the, might want to reduce the Zoom screen, minimize that, and get back to the.
Actually, all he has to do is share his screen and go into the tab that he needs to go in.
We're viewing your screen, so yeah, if you just pull up on your laptop just the deck.
It's up. I can see it. I'm reading it.
Actually, if I may tell you what you need to do is you need to go to share your screen, and then when you choose to share your screen, it lets you choose which one of all your windows open on your computer you want to share.
Yeah, sometimes you have
there you go. Success.
Got it.
All good.
Yep.
Okay, like I was saying, and of course, this is this is kind of apropos for everything that we've been doing today, which is nothing is going quite the way we had planned it. And so in keeping with that theme, this diagram, which I know is a little overwhelming, but if you focus on the green triangle in the middle, this is meant to be a diagram for gratitude, okay? And it begins with respect at the bottom, appreciation in the middle, and generosity at the top. And again, I don't have time to go through this in any detail just because of the timing of everything that's transpired today. But I will say this, is that if you think about the work that Teddy does, he implores all of us to begin with loving ourselves and respecting ourselves. And that emanates out into the world. And then much of our work is about appreciating what it is that we have, especially in times like this. And so this diagram, I think you can see it points from the word appreciation points to the left. This is an acronym, if you remember, POTENT, that stands for these words: people, opportunities, things, experiences, nature, and thoughts. I went through that very fast. We'll come back to that in just a second.
And we'll make sure, Ron, we'll make sure that this is in the notes at the, Lily, if you can make sure that this is added to whatever we're sending out to people afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yes, and then at the top is generosity. The top is generosity. So if you think of that as a sequence, respect, appreciation, and generosity, they're all related, and they're all related to gratitude. In this worldview, everything else is not gratitude. And I want to, again, conjure up Teddy's work. About 10 days ago, he did a meditation about greed, hatred, and delusion. And I think if you think in terms of greed, hatred, and delusion, which is quite prevalent in the world, especially during this COVID-19, I think you'll see that a big part of the antidote is gratitude in this model. And what I'm going to do real quickly, and again, I apologize for my contribution to the chaos today, but whatever we can do to unwind that, either next week or in the subsequent few weeks. Believe me, I've given a lot of thought to this. I believe there's something to this. So what I'd like to do here, if I can get this thing to move. Well,
go to the next slide.
Well, I'm trying to.
Okay.
All right. Well, so what I was going to do here, the next slide is a slide of Maslow's hierarchy. So Chip, what I'd like to do is hand it off to you and talk a little bit about how Maslow's hierarchy, particularly how survival needs have come into play here with COVID-19, and how addressing those needs is really an imperative at this point in time before we can talk about what we can do creatively with money and where money fits in.
Before we do that, could you tell us what MINT means? Diane Johnson was asking, what M-I-N-T?
Okay, well, again, next week I'll go into this, but it's generosity is time, energy, attention, resources. That's tiers. And resources are money, ideas, networks, things, technology, and talent.
Wow, okay. That's a lot there. So I'll be brief to bring it back to you. So basically, everybody knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, 5 levels. There's really 3 themes. And these 3 themes basically relate to life. There's either survival, succeed, or transform. So the physiological and safety needs are survival needs. The social belonging and esteem needs are success needs. And then self-actualization is a transformation need. What's really important in a downturn, and especially when you're dealing with your own emotions being all over, is to get the survival needs addressed. But true wealth is not about, having your survival needs met. I mean, yes, that allows you to start moving up that pyramid. And frankly, at a time when your survival needs are not being met, you have to look for every option you have. And when I say your survival needs, I mean your emotional survival needs as well. One of the things that we've talked about is the fact that the emotional survival needs can be helped by having emotional insurance. And emotional insurance is part of what MEA is meant to be. And it's part of the reason we did our alumni survey of you, and so many of you filled it out, because what we want to look at is how does MEA Alumni Association, how could it be an insurance policy for your emotions? But what's interesting is as you move up from, the basics of life, money and having enough money, having enough air, having enough water, food, you move up the pyramid. And as you move up the pyramid, you move to the things that are actually more valuable in the long run. When someone's on their deathbed, they don't usually talk about how much money they have. They talk about the things that actually are connected to other people. So you move through those success needs, and then at the top of that pyramid is self-actualization, but Maslow later in life actually turned it into self-transcendence. And he basically said, the thing that really matters in life, what really creates wealth, is your sense that you have actually delivered and generated for other people something that has allowed them to actually move up the pyramid themselves. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You go up that pyramid yourself and you help bring people up with you. Back to you, Ron.
Yeah, so really kind of taking off on that is, if you take a look at this statement, after satisfying your basic needs, look the lower levels of that pyramid, then money is for discovering and rediscovering those things that bring you happiness, fulfillment, meaning, and joy in every phase of your life. And so that's the basic premise, this shift from wealth as we have come to know it in our society. Typically, the societal narrative, which is, having lots of money, material possessions, status, power, etc. and transitioning that to thinking in terms of those things that bring you these higher levels in Maslow's pyramid. So it really comes down to what do you care about most. And so what I'd like to do is show you now another diagram that I use in my work and that I've spent quite a bit of time developing and using with literally thousands of clients over my career. And it's this. If you can see that. So remember on the previous diagram about gratitude, I had people, opportunities, things, experiences, nature, and thoughts on the left. And that was tied to appreciation. So if you think about the things that you care about most, what you can do is then take those things and put them into these 4 categories. So I'm going to start in the upper left with core, if you can see that. Core are those things that I think, if you think about now, in the COVID era, one of the things that people value most is their health and well-being. The temple of their soul, which is their body, right? And if you have your health, it's something that you cherish more so than ever before. And if you don't, they have a saying that, when you don't have your health, that's really all you really want is to get your health back. So that your health, then if you think further, going back to people, right now, I think all of us are aware of the people that matter most to us. The people that either you're fortunate to be with, or those people who you're isolated from that you can't see, that you really care about a lot. And certainly for me, I could use a little oxytocin right now from this isolation. So to me, it really brings to the forefront the people that are most important. Then opportunities, the ones we don't have, like I miss the freedom to roam and to get out and do things. And I also am very grateful for the opportunities I do have still. Things, material possessions, and then experiences. I want to go to the top right because this, I think, is the essence of MEA. MEA, I think, is about discovery. It's about, Chip, as you might say, instead of proving, it's about improving. It's about growth. It's that growth mindset that you talk about so much. And I consider that to be an essential part of true wealth. If we're going to be a wisdom school, a wisdom community, it's when we should think about that learning and that growth as part of our true wealth. And that money, which is down in the lower left, is there to support that rather than to be an end in and of itself. And then I'll go to the bottom right, which is contribution. Another way of looking at that is generosity, which was in our discussion about gratitude. Generosity, and again, you talk about this as well, is that the part of the antidote to greed, hatred, and delusion is generosity. And I think part of the wealth that one experiences in giving and in contributing and being our best selves and so doing is the joy that one experiences from giving. So this, to me, is what I've come to call true wealth. It's what we've come to build our view of money and finance and what it could be and what I think MEA is all about. So let me pause there. And
so Ron, we have about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Yep. So let's do this. We had Chip, you had a slide at the end that you wanted to talk about. I can throw that to you, or you can talk about Ikigai. What would you like to talk about?
I think why don't we just wrap up, since for those who actually have the MEA workbook, look at the Ikigai on page 114, if I'm not mistaken, and you'll find that's a beautiful way of looking at true wealth. When you can feel like you are doing something that it feels like it's your calling, and maybe midlife is not about crisis, it's about calling, finding that calling, and it's something that you enjoy doing, it's something that the world needs, and it's something that the world can pay you for. It's great. So again, to spell that word, it's Ikigai. Feel free to look it up if you don't have it in your workbook. It's a great way and a great exercise of how to actually think about what it is you're meant to do. So, oh, in fact, I think there it is right there. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to say we do a wrap here and see if there's any questions maybe from the group for you, Ron. Let's see if anybody has a question. Actually, first of all, just to make sure everybody sees this with this last slide. So Ron's going to be doing a Zoom workshop on Saturday, May 16th, so a week from today, and we'll go deeper into this. And there's no cost to that, Ron. And this is not a we're not marketing you, but for those who want to dive deeper, you can.
On the contrary, what I'd ask is if people, if they get anything out of it, if they would consider making a contribution to the employee fund, MEA. That link is there on that slide, but I'm not asking for anything. I'd certainly encourage people to make a contribution to that.
Let's see if we have one or two questions. And Diane has her hand raised. Let's go ahead and have Diane ask the question.
Perfect. Yeah, Ron, one of the things that I'm curious about what you're seeing in your clients about this reframing of wealth, because one of the things about COVID is that it's made so clear and evident the fault lines around the unequitable distribution of wealth. Mm-hmm. So what's your sense about of the system that perpetuates the huge distinctions of resources, given that we're now living in COVID-19?
It's a great question. One of the things that certainly MEA emphasizes is to work on the things and try to focus on the things you can control versus the things you can't control. And so there's several levels. I think at the individual level, I've been on both sides of this, where I've been very poor and quite wealthy. And I think that the biggest challenge for me is to I work primarily with financial advisors, is to help them help others see that the path to meaning and joy in life is through contribution, is to helping others. And I think it's tough for now. I think those of us who are business owners, it's hard. I know, Chip, you're going through this, and trying to keep people employed, but that's really one of the biggest contributions that people can do if they have money, is to keep people employed. For those people who don't, there's really, I mean, 2/3 of the people are experiencing anxiety about their futures and about their financial futures. So a big part of that is getting their emotions under control, and then getting their priorities straight in terms of what's essential. And, a lot of us have bought into this idea that what's essential is to appear like we have money, or to have a bigger house or more cars and things like that. And when you get down to it, and I had to go through this myself personally, is that sometimes it takes something like this for you to realize that if you have a roof over your head and food to eat and close relationships, that's a start. And hopefully everybody has that. And if they don't, then that's where there's no shame in reaching out to others for help.
We have time for, thank you, one last question. If anybody else has a question, just raise your hand using the raising hand function at the footer of your screen. Well, if there are no other questions, let me just say one last thing. David Brooks is a New York Times reporter I don't always love his politics. Let me start by saying that. But I actually appreciate him as a human. I've actually met him at the TED conference and at just a couple times. And what I actually really appreciated is a few years ago, he wrote an op-ed based upon resume values or eulogy values. What are the morals that define you, and what actually gives a person a sense of meaning and wealth? And I'd highly recommend you look for David Brooks' New York Times article on resume versus eulogy. And I think what you'll find is that at the end of the day, the things that are most meaningful and important to you in your life are the things that you want said at your eulogy, not the things that actually appear on your LinkedIn resume. And that's particularly true during a time like this.
Greetings, everybody. Teddy Dean here, sending out prayers and well wishes in the hopes that you are all healthy, happy, and safe. Very, very honored to be able to join you all for your reunion and lead you through a very simple guided grounding meditation here. So we'll go ahead and start with the practice by taking a comfortable seated position. And we'll simply utilize the resources that we have built into this body, one of them being this sense of awareness. And we start to tap into this awareness, and we allow that awareness to flush through this body gently, to allow this sense of awareness to just kind of massage through the body gently, to allow us to experience the felt sense of being in this body, the feeling tone of being in this body. We can start to tap into the weightiness of the body, the heaviness of the body. We feel the body planted down on the ground. We feel the body being supported by the earth itself. And next we tap into the breath. We just simply become aware of the breath. We contemplate the breath as just the breath. And as we start to become aware of the breath, we start to experience the natural nurturing qualities that the breath can offer us. To sit here for just a moment and breathe the body and experience the compassionate nature of what the breath offers us. As we breathe in this sense of compassion, we allow the body to expand, and we exhale that breath right back out into the world, into this life, letting go into the moment and clearing out a little space for the rest of our day. We bring the hands to prayer in front of the heart center. May all beings find their natural rhythm. May all beings cultivate joy. May all beings drop into grace. And may all beings be free of suffering. And again, may we all learn to bring this awareness back into the body, to allow this body to provide guidelines for this life, this beautiful, wonderful life that we have. And we continue with our practice to allow ourselves to stay on the path. Namaste. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to practice with you very quickly here. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. Namaste. Bye-bye, everybody.
There you are. Hello.
You're here with us both on screen, but also on the back wall. And oh, look at this one right here. So each of us are going to take about 5 minutes to just give quick summaries on some things. A lot of information to present to you. And so we'll actually even have some slides for part of it. I'm going to actually focus on the alumni survey. First of all, over 330 of you filled out that long ass survey. Thank you. Lots and lots of really good information in there, really helpful for us, because part of our intent is to really create a sustainable long-term MEA alumni program. Winning cohort the winning cohort gets to actually have me as their 1 hour partner in a session is the 50 Shades of Love. So congratulations to them. Actually, if you go back to the slide just before, if you don't mind. There we go, perfect. So I will be joining you. We'll figure that one out. What else do we need to know? You come from 24 countries, or you came here from 24 countries. Your average age is 54. About 25% of our MEA alums are people of color, and just over 60% are women. 40% of you are self-employed, and that visual looks perfect right now. You're doing a lot of things at once. 65% of you use the skills and tools that you learned here in your personal and professional life on a regular basis. And look at this one, 97% of you feel that you are more mindful and present because of having joined us. That's amazing. The number one skill that you deepened here at MEA was exploring your purpose. The number one motivation that you said that for the MEA program was self-growth, continued learning, and self-development. In fact, that was double number 2. So part of the reason that was interesting to us is that it does speak to the idea of how do we continue self-growth and continued development for you, because it's not just a one-time thing. 81% of you, to speak to that, said you'd like to have an MEA graduate program or additional programs available. Obviously, we have workshops here, and I think it's already 15 of you have come to Mastery Weeks. So we'd love to have you come back, but we're also going to look at what other kind of programs we can offer you. 98% of you stay connected to people in your cohorts or the group as a whole. That one shocked me. And that's 40% of you on a weekly basis. So that social wellness, that connection that you feel toward each other continues on. That said, we hear you, and there are a few things that you love that we don't have yet. There's some tools you'd love to have. You'd love to see a marketplace, something that's better organized around how you can offer services and products to each other. You'd love a better directory that allows you to find, if you wanted to find all the people who are MEA alums who are interested in opera or in World Cup soccer, or would like to actually take a trip as a group to Iceland in July, wouldn't it be interesting if our directory actually allowed for that? It doesn't right now. You don't use Mighty Network a whole lot. We get that. We're looking for some other alternatives as well. Yeah, and just figuring out how to get robust toolkits. We're taking advantage of this time of being closed to build some new changes into the alumni program. And we have your extensive alumni survey is being, every single one of the survey results has been fully read, recorded, and Jim Dunnigan, Nim DeSwart, and Leslie Barrett are together pulling together a business plan for us moving forward in terms of how we can create an even more robust alumni program for you as we move forward. So thank you for all that information. It was really helpful for us. I think I have covered everything. So I'm going to move it to Christine.
Hi, everybody. I am going to talk about the letter that landed in everyone's inbox from me this week, from all of us, really. I first want to acknowledge it was deeply uncomfortable to send that ask. I want to acknowledge that we have no idea what condition the desks that received that letter are in, and we know that it is an unprecedented time. We understand that. We also are committed to making this work and want to continue to service this community and new compadres, and it honestly is what it's going to take. We've made some decisions here that aren't strictly financial. We are paying our local team all the way through. We've kept them employed. We are sponsoring food boxes to their families. We are having those food boxes, they are directed that they can either keep or pass on. We've asked them to help identify people in their communities who might need more help. And we are doing that because we believe that stabilizing our community is the smartest, kindest, wisest thing that we can do in a time of unprecedented change. That puts a lot of strain on our business, because I'm pretty sure everyone knows that we are a passion project and a legacy project, and we don't function the way that a bottom line driven business might. That's fair to say. One of the issues, or one of the iterations of the letter, I'd actually written about how this thing only exists because Chip paid for it. And as we polished it, I did pull it out, but there was kind of a more raw edition about what we owe to this man and his dedication and passion and insanity to put this whole thing together. And that Jeff and I and our whole team hope that we can all rally around to show him how much he means to us and how we value what we have here. So you're welcome. What else do I want you to know? We do have a few different ways that you can participate, and they're all outlined in the letter, and every bit of it helps, and no amount is too small. And we absolutely understand if you are not in a position to participate financially. No shame, no harm, no foul, we get it. There are vacation weeks, pre-booking, a workshop, those all go to our operational bottom line. You want to make a donation to the staff, that will go directly to them. And we also have Age, which is coming online in August. I think there might have been a little confusion. This is our nonprofit. It is not quite ready yet. At this point, you are simply making a pledge, and we will get in touch with you when the IRS waves the magic wand and says that we are ready to receive donations. We have a group of donors ready to match what we can raise in this time, up to $300,000. And that is our goal, is to get to 300,000. We just broke 50,000 yesterday, so we are having some headway, and we are grateful for every dollar, every peso, and every kind letter that has come in. I kind of hit send on that and then sat back in my chair and took a deep breath, and the kind emails started flooding in immediately, and that meant so much to me. So thank you for that.
Christine?
Yeah.
We have a question. Can donations be made on a monthly basis? In other words, a pledge to MEA on a monthly basis?
Thank you, Linda. Absolutely, that can happen. And if you follow the link to the pledge sheet, there's a way to let us know that that's what you want to do. Again, we won't be collecting that until at least August. So at this point, it's just letting us know your intentions, and we will follow up. But it's very easy for us to set up a monthly pledge amount.
But we are, you are accepting donations for the operations fund, right? For the staff? That you can take. It's just Age that's a pledge.
And the donations that we are taking now that go directly to staff are not tax deductible. If you are looking for a tax deduction, that's what happens with Age in August, and both ways help us. So thank you. Any other questions around that? If it comes up, just let me know, Linda or Leslie. We also have a special scholarship that we are announcing that is sponsored primarily by the Soul Train group. And this is for Lynn Elizabeth Farzaroli. She came here, she was quite young and was in remission from cancer when she came. Unfortunately, she did lose that fight with cancer. And in her memory, and this is a picture of her on stage with her adorable daughter, she was such a bright light. She brought so much wisdom to her group. And as we've seen time and time again, the importance of intergenerational collaboration, she was just amazing. And we have a quote from her family that Lynn's MEA experience in Mexico was transformative for her. She returned emotionally, intellectually, and physically fortified, and more determined than ever to live her best life. Shortly after, in January, her cancer spread, and I believe that the strength she gained through the experience helped her with us during the last year. So thank you to Soul Train for committing money to the scholarship so that we can continue to sponsor young learners and one old soul or old souls in a young body to come down and experience and contribute to MEA each year. I think that's about it for me. I have one last thing that's a little off script. In our quarterly town hall, our last quarterly town hall, we began a new tradition of the Pearl Award, where we recognize outstanding contributions to the alumni and MEA community from one member of our community who really exemplifies qualities that we find to be wise, and in this case, wise and gorgeous. This person is gentle. She's guided us towards this life-saving tech long before it was life-saving tech. She is so capable, so confident, and so competent. And joyous, always joyous. She always brings a light to every room that she's in. We just want to celebrate her competence and her quiet confidence. And we are so happy that you found your beloved, because you are quite beloved to us. So I think many of you will know who the recipient of the Pearl Award is right now, but I'm so proud to recognize Carrie Henley for her service to our.
Hey, that was not in the script.
I couldn't tell you. Is there anything that either of you want to add?
One other thing I'll just say is that she helped us launch the alumni program. She and Laura Campbell were the co-chairs of the advisory board, and helped us get to the place where we got Leslie in the position she's in, and we wouldn't be where we are, and in fact, our very first Zoom call was, in fact, that's just a flash. Our very first Zoom call that we had as an alum group, which was September of 2018, was due to Carrie. So, Carrie, thank you.
And when I asked Jeff, can you give me one sentence about Carrie Henley? Jeff, what did you have to say?
Carrie Henley for president.
Yes. Christine, we have one question from the group.
Yes.
Is MEA structured as a nonprofit only, or is there a for-profit venture vehicle available for angel investment?
Excellent question. Write me, Christine at modernelderacademy.com, and we can talk.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, guys. Brief update from me as well. Carrie Henley for president, everybody. Just make sure you, let's just get buttons. Actually, Carrie, do you want to just say a couple of words? Because we truly are grateful to you.
It's not very often that I'm speechless. Seriously, I was not prepared. I'm already in tears. I'm on next. That was so crazy. Thank you. I owe so much to Chip and MEA, and it's been such a joy. And I have said many times that the light that Chip and the team has, that brought so many of us to the shores of MEA, and the joy I've had working with the board. And it's been an amazing group of people. Every single person I've met that has had anything to do with MEA has been an incredible gift to my life. So it's just right back at you. Thank you so much.
It is weird, Carrie, that you decorated your house exactly like Chip's house, but
I'm a super fan. I'm a super fan.
It's just the way these things go. Thank you so much. Rolling on the update train, remember that there are a number of ways of getting involved. Christine sort of suggested some ways, and people are going to become venture investors. It's very exciting. But things like vacation week are coming up. Think about yourself, your friends, and who else might come along to that as well. The last vacation week was super mellow and super beautiful. So consider that. I know that I've actually been on a bunch of cohort emails just today where people are starting to brainstorm and dream up their own ways of contributing, whether it's donating services that then they would then provide the revenues from to the Academy. These are all beautiful ideas, and I think as both Chip and Christine have said, we're really grateful for any and every bit of support that you guys can give us. More practically, and in a way that can help us all in terms of our own ongoing development and what we might want to see ourselves doing, is think about signing up for another course. the upcoming academic calendar is super interesting. We've got some incredible people coming to speak, including Paul Hawken, Lynn Twist, and the poet Mark Nepo that I'm going to be teaching with, which is just, I'm pretty gripped about the people that are coming because I get to hang out with them and make friends with them and get all vulnerable and gushy and mushy with them. See if there's anyone that speaks to you. And if there is, right now, and only right now, you get 20% off if you sign up for a mastery week with the Modern Elder Academy. So yeah, no, appreciate the ability to sign up and get involved. What is the exact date of the last mastery week? I think we had 9 people come who were alumni.
Yep.
To the Paul Hawken week. So we've actually had some really great return visits, and it's beautiful seeing people, but it's also really deepening and enriching to have these kind of ninjas in the group, these people who know what's going on and kind of can really push the culture into those weeks. So that's exciting. What is next? From the, a bunch of you became ambassadors. 90% of our alumni already have done referrals to other people. You're our greatest asset in terms of the experience that you had and communicating that to friends, to families, to colleagues, to anyone. Please keep doing that. Thank you so much if you signed up as an ambassador. As Christine said, it's not all about money. It's about helping us think about how to reach the world and how to reach people that might be interested in the work that we are doing. All of this sort of work tunes into thoughts about learning and long life learning, lifelong learning. We've been talking a lot here at the Academy about what is it that kind of keeps you fresh, that keeps you moving in the second half of your life or in the second part of your life. We've been meeting consistently with the team at DCI, the Distinguished Careers Institute at Stanford, who've all been sort of putting research together around how community and having a purpose and well-being are core parts of a thriving ongoing life. And in terms of that, embedded into each one of those elements is this kind of learning mindset, this growth mindset, the ability to learn as being pivotal to having a long life and a healthier elderhood. So long life learning has been on the agenda. So yeah, as you consider where you're going to spend your time and how you're going to think about your time, think about that. In terms of our work and some of the experiments that we've been running in long life learning, we've been running mastery hours, and I'd love to thank Leslie Bartlett, Leslie, our beautiful hostess, for the day today, for curating, co-hosting, and just kind of organizing those hours. They've been epic. We've had, Leslie, what, like upwards of 100 people on every single one, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so,
over 100.
yeah.
Every week. We've done 7 so far. You've done 7 so far.
He's done 7.
Been really great participation, engagement, and interesting. They're all great.
And all kinds of really interesting people, from sort of filmmakers to, you know, Bob Waxman has spoken, and yeah, Danny Friedland talked about conscious leadership and so on. So jump on. We are going to try and sort of rationalize the fire hose of communications that are coming towards you. We appreciate that it's a lot, but also we're trying to sort of work out how to best let people know what's going on. We are trying to sort of put out content for people during these times where, you know, maybe you are feeling slightly isolated at home, or slightly alone, or even within family, just wanting to get the hell out of your head and see what other people are talking and thinking about. So we will reduce the fire hose and make it more directed and let you opt into some of these things as well. But we really enjoyed doing those sessions. Jen Mayer, our team member from IDEO, organized a virtual MEA day, which was stunning. And again, there's a whole crowd of you that were a part of that, and we're super grateful to the small group of, I think it was 6, was it 8? 8 of us that came together to sort of see, could we trial doing some of these virtual sessions and what would that look like? Stay tuned. I think it will definitely show up pre and post MEA in terms of alumni work and kind of pushing content out there. Jen has also been spearheading some work on a rebranding exercise. So just keep that on the down low. Don't tell anyone. but we'll be announcing about that later on in the year. I'm super excited about it. It makes me really happy personally. So we're really thrilled to have Jen and Raleigh here kind of helping us work and think. And actually, I just wanted also to sort of say, in this time where we're all being so incredibly careful, self-isolating and so on, it does look a little weird that we're all snuggled on a sofa. We've all been in isolation together. So just to be clear, we take this really seriously. The group that you see here has been really conscientious about not going out. None of us have left this stupid building for like 7 months, or 7 weeks rather.
7 years.
7 years, 7 long years. It's how it feels. So lots of interesting programming, lots of interesting thinking. We've also been thinking about how we extend out our footprint in this community. As some of you know, I've been involved in some work called Baja Sage, which is our first prototype community that we're building here. And that has just been it's been astonishing for me to be involved in that, and just seeing the most magical people show up and say, hey, this sounds cool. Even in the middle of this crazy time, let's do something together. And the power, again, just sort of borrowing from Danny Friedland, the power of, instead of going down to fear, sort of moving up towards something aspirational and something creative and co-creative. People talking about kind of collecting together to buy farmland and collecting together to build studios and all kinds of crazy things that could hub around what we're trying to achieve down here, has been feeding me personally. So it's just been an incredible, turbulent but amazing few weeks down here in Baja. I think that is about it from my end of things. Yeah, let us move on to the next. Lovely to see you all.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. Good.
Hey, everybody. We're so excited to do this talk. I'm coming to you from Colorado.
And I'm here in Los Angeles. And so we're doing this super fancy video production because we are sheltering 1,000 miles apart. And we put together this talk so you can see us together on one slide.
And the name of our talk is Modern Elder Love. Steve and I met when we were at MEA, when our hearts were pretty broken and bruised. We barely interacted with each other while we were there that week. We didn't fall in love until afterwards. And together, we discovered an unending possibility for a quality of relationship and a level of love that we had never even imagined was possible. So we are going to tell you our story today. This talk is really all about you. So just take a moment and close your eyes and think about, who do you love? Who do you adore? Who do you cherish in your life? Just take a moment and conjure up their face.
And in that warm conjuring up, as you're thinking through this, now expand and conjure up the faces of 3 people that you unconditionally love. And notice how you respond just by thinking about them. Maybe it's your children, maybe it's your parents or your friends, maybe it's your partner. Really feel those feelings. And now, let's turn our attentions towards our experience of romance. Take a second and reflect upon one of the most romantic moments of your life. Where was it? What do you see? What did it sound like? What smells were around? What did it taste like? Let yourself get lost in the memory. That memory of when your heart was completely consumed by love for another. So here's a question. What if love could become your North Star? A direction to move you to a higher understanding of yourself. Have you ever thought about love as a teacher?
And you know, we've all learned about the power of liminality in midlife. And we're certainly living in a totally liminal world right now. And we've all been liminal at some point in our life in relationship to love. We've had our hearts filled and broken, and for some of us, more than once, twice, or a few times. But we now have enough experience and enough wisdom to examine love itself as an existential and a very practical life teacher. So maybe we had preliminary understanding of love in that more egoic first half of our life. But now we have an opportunity for a much more soulful perspective. So the question is, can we get liminal with love? Whether it's renewing a relationship that's decades old, or being alone, or deciding to try again. So certainly being liminal is how it started with us. I arrived at MEA in June of 2018 as liminal as anybody could be. I was starting a divorce after 17 years of marriage, and I actually left my home, came to Todos Santos, and I'd be moving into a new home once I got back. I had tried to come to MEA twice earlier that year, but I couldn't due to some significant family health crises. So falling in love was the last thing that was on my mind.
And I was also totally liminal at that time. I was about as gooey as you could get. I had sold my company and was traveling around Mexico, contemplating selling my house, and traveling with me, a backpack, and my dog, just kind of being as liminal as I could possibly be, really trying to find out what my identity was going to be. I was searching, I just wasn't quite sure what I was searching for. And I had come through a couple of difficult relationships, so love was not really on my mind either. And I had actually been back and forth with Christine a couple of times as to whether or not I was going to come to MEA or not. And in the end, I finally decided to say yes.
And so this picture of us here in the background was at the taco truck. Everybody remembers the taco truck. So Steve and I had our only sharing session earlier that day, the entire week with our cohort, Michael. And during that day, at the end of our discussion, which was about old patterns in relationships, I had said out of the blue that if I ever got into a relationship again at this stage of my life, it would be with a beloved or nothing at all. And I had no idea why I said that word. And at the very moment I said the word beloved, this bird flew right into the portico window like a messenger and suspended itself there. It was kind of crazy. It was such a prescient moment. And neither one of us could have possibly imagined how that word beloved would come to impact our lives after we left MEA. So now we decided to prepare for you a little video that shares our MEA love story. So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We had so much fun making it. And just like the last slide in that video, the gifts of your life come from the most unexpected places. So that was the beginning of our adventure. And now it's your turn.
Falling in love and creating a conscious beloved relationship became a true hero's journey for Carrie and I. And we realized it was something that everyone can discover. And the question really is, from Joseph Campbell, he brings this really to the forefront. He brings it home with the following. The big question is if you're going to be able to say a hearty yes to your adventure. And what if that adventure was love? New love, renewed love, self-love. Decide right now to challenge yourself to the adventure of elevating your relationship to love itself, whether you're single or in a long-term relationship or in new love. Just decide. Every modern elder has the job to decide, to be courageous, and to really say yes to everything.
And you know, all of you said yes to MEA. And you said yes to this expanding community and the adventures that it's brought you thus far. So what would it look like to say yes to love? To reevaluate all the relationships in your life with the word beloved as a master teacher. Now, as Stephen and I started calling each other beloved, and we felt transported by this higher level relationship, we discovered that there was a hidden puzzle in the word beloved during a meditation. So if you look at this word, beloved, first, it means to be love, to fully open your heart. And then, in turn, to be loved, to allow yourself to truly receive from others. And so this became the gateway to our book. And ta-da! Here it is. Stephen and I were consumed with the subject of being students of higher love for a year, and we wrote our book called Becoming Beloveds, A Practical Guide to Building Stronger Relationships, and we did dedicate it to Chip and to Saul. It's a reflection tool for anybody, whether you're currently in love or not, to explore how to grow into a higher and more conscious perspective about love and how to create relationships of the soul. We wanted to craft a lyrical book like The Alchemist or The Four Agreements that will inspire you to read alone or to share. And we designed an adventure to earn beloved love and to build new foundations, castles, gardens, bridges, mandalas, and emerge at the top as a cosmic dance. We applied Maslow's hierarchy of needs to love. And we paired those well-known levels with our own metaphors and imagery for a deeply reflective experience and some practical tools to improve communication, connection, quality time, and goals.
And we infused the book with ideas like the Japanese purpose-driven concept of ikigai, and then applied it to love. We chose a huge selection of quotes from teachers, and we sprinkled them throughout the book. And then we wrote original reflection questions for you to contemplate along your journey. Some of our original poetry is also included in the book, such as this poem that kind of started it all. And so this is our official debut. Carrie and I are giving all MEA a free digital copy of the book for you to read right away. And we recorded an audiobook for you as well. It is our gift. The link is in your welcome packet, and we'll also put it in the chat. And we are so excited to have you as part of this journey and to join our community. And our vision is to inspire 1 million people to join our beloved movement of beloved trailblazers. And we also started a company called Stardust and Honey. And once you get to the site, you will see our honey shower date night kits, our monthly beloved habits, our 7 days of honey drops, and get access to all of our social media pages. And we're just getting started. So it's never too late to really discover the soul of beloved love and to spread it wherever you go.
Thank you guys so much. It was such a pleasure to share this with you all, and we look forward to connecting with you afterwards.
and he just published his book, Next for Me. So he's going to talk to us about planning our next chapters. What's next for you? Take it away, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm an MEA alum from the Diagonal Darlings cohort, which was a 2-week program in the early beta days. And I'm so grateful to be here today with all of you and tell you about the exercises that we published in this book that will help people, hopefully, who are looking for some change in their life in some way. Here it is now. In a lot of ways, our company Next for Me was hatched because of MEA. And back in the days when it was a drone footage over the beach, I remember Chip showing me. And since that time, it's like 2.5, 3 years, we now publish news, guides, and books around the topic of change. We have hosted events across the country, and we're reevaluating that, of course, now. And we also consult with organizations who are trying to understand today's workers and the changes that people are going through. So if you'll bear with me, I will show you a few slides afterwards. I'll get it. Okay. Let's see. Okay, before I get started, can I get an amen? R.I.P. Little Richard. Okay. All right, here we go. So we're on a mission to make your next change your best yet. And we went through some machinations through the last 2.5 years trying to understand, first of all, 50+ workers. And then we got down to the hypotheses that change is something that everybody's going through all the time. And there are some practical things that you can do to make that easier for yourself. And I mean, part of the problem that we see in the world is there's a lot of insecurity and stress about work and financial health and those things, and now more than ever. And so many people are disengaged by the rate of change, and so they're always trying to see what's next, and they can't always get clear around that. So in our book, we cover it in 3 ways. First of all, your philosophical center. Who am I and why do I exist here? And using that as a foundation for defining what's next. And then fresh perspectives, which is a lot of fun. Some of the stuff came out of MEA actually, of different ways of looking at what you're thinking about to open up new opportunities. And then the very tactical things of how do you stay standing while you're going through these kinds of things. At the philosophical side of things, before even defining it, we suggest that you go through some exercises to say what your values are and knowing who you stand for and what are the principles that are important to you, and writing a mission statement either for yourself or for what you're starting or the companies that you may be working with. And then who are the people that you surround yourself with? Do they share your values, and can you trust them in a lot of different situations before you go forward? And then who are you beholden to? We caution about being beholden to too many things or people, because those things can change all of the time. And so next is a lot of the fun part for me, which is based on the ideas of open-mindedness or beginner's mind or meditation, and how that opens up your mind to be receptive to new things. And as part of that, we suggest some exercises around visualization. The idea there is that if you have defined what this ideal scene is that you're going towards, and an opportunity comes to you, you've already seen it, and you're receptive and you're welcoming to that thing. And so it's different for everybody, but we really emphasize that writing is a strong piece of this. You by writing it down, sometimes making it public, you look at things from a very fresh point of view, especially if it's handwritten. The eye to hand coordination is really profound in the way it makes you look at things differently. And for some people, it's drawing, and stick figures can do, or mapping. And in mapping, sort of forming the relationships of different things, you find out things you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And then using constraints. What happens if you pull away a component of this thing, this map that you've made? What does that leave you with? And then, of course, because all of us are thinking about where we've been in our lives, you know, use that deja vu. You've done so many things a lot of times ahead of time. So just pull that in and don't be afraid of it, and just don't get hung up on it. And then, you know, now we're certainly looking at how important it is taking care of our minds and our bodies. I come from tech, and so we think about things in the respect of hacking. It's, you know, an engineer will say, okay, these are my limited resources. How can I solve this problem by doing workarounds? And that happens, you know, so much if you're trying to do something new. You don't have all the resources. So how do you think creatively about getting that thing accomplished without all the resources? This was a hard one for me to learn, but I had to start selling, and I should have started selling from day one. I didn't. If you're trying to put yourself out in the world, people need to know what it is you've got, and don't be afraid of it, and don't get hung up on the next webpage update or whatever. Get out there and start selling stuff right away. Be frugal. Don't, you know, pay for everything. You can do a lot of things yourself when you're going through these changes, which plays into the dependencies that you have. One thing could get pulled out from you, and it might change your whole game. And going back to writing, we really believe that you should always be publishing. The way the world works today is, if you want the support of somebody, they're going to be looking for who you are online, out in the world, what you think about what you're doing. And so you might be surprised. This book came out of a year of publishing, and all the ideas started germinating, and then it became one thing, and then it became another thing, all because we kept publishing and putting stuff out there and being sort of vulnerable in that way. And then who's your community? I mean, look at who I'm hanging out with. And then finally, how time is so critical. It really feels elastic right now, and time doesn't have a lot of meaning, but use your time well. We don't have a lot of it. You know, if you're on your way to something, get with it, and don't waste a lot of time. So this is who we are today as a company. We publish video interviews and podcasts. We've done public and now virtual events. We publish resource guides, books, and courses. And for marketers and people trying to understand today's marketplace, we publish market research. We bring on sponsors for our various programs, and we write and write and write, sometimes for other people. So all of this has been kind of captured on this page, nextforme.com/MEA. You can sign up. We'll send you a digital book. We encourage you to buy our book and write reviews on Amazon. That's how the magic works there. And I'm open for questions.
We all need heroes in our lives. And Mark Friedman is a hero of mine. He is my modern elder. Yes, he's a couple years older than me. But when I first started looking into the longevity and aging space, everybody I talked to who was sort of peripherally or involved in the space kept telling me, go talk to Mark. Mark seems to know the most about this. And Mark was so generous with his time. We were supposed to spend, I think, an hour for a lunch, and we went much longer than that. And he was so helpful for me in my early, very curious stage of thinking about life stages. He's written many very good books. I think all of them are in the MEA library. His most recent one is a spectacular book called How to Live Forever, The Enduring Power of Connecting the Generations. And his talk today will be very much focused on that. His colleague, senior colleague, colleague Marcy Albaher, is one of our guest faculty members and did a workshop. Woo, yes, did a workshop in late January, and she was on the Mastery Hour with Jeff and Carrie Hannon recently. So I'm going to just pass it on to Mark and just say, Mark, thank you so much for being part of the MEA community, for giving us your time. You are exceptionally popular on the lecture circuit. So for us to get a little bit of your time today is much appreciated. And so for everybody who's wondering, will we have Q&A with Mark? We in fact will. So Mark, take it away.
Thanks so much, Chip. It's embarrassing almost, but I'm such an unabashed fan of Chip's and of the MEA. I'm just one step away from wandering the streets of San Francisco with an MEA sandwich board, accosting strangers and sending them to Baja. So that's when Chip said it would be possible to be part of the ReZoomion, I was absolutely overjoyed. And it's also such an honor to follow Jeff and to hear Carrie and Stephen's presentation. The invocation of Joseph Campbell made me think of my favorite Joseph Campbell line, so appropriate to MEA, which is, midlife is when you get to the top of the ladder and discover it's leaning against the wrong wall. And we all need a place to go and find that new wall, and MEA is definitely that place. I thought I'd start and just invoke my own modern elder, in part because one of the real highlights of last year for me was the chance to be on a panel with Chip at the 60th reunion of his father's class at Stanford. And I discovered that day that their commencement speaker had been John Gardner, who 40 years later became my mentor and taught me what it meant to be a modern elder. And I've been thinking about John a lot lately because he was Lyndon Johnson's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare and was the architect of the Great Society. And during the battles over Medicare, he said, "America today faces breathtaking opportunities disguised as unsolvable problems." And I can think of no better characterization of the situation today. But then at one time I remember having coffee with him, and he told me something which I feel like could be a watchword for every modern elder. He said that he didn't really find his purpose in life until he discovered that it was much more important to be interested than to be interesting. And that has rattled around for me for a long time. John won the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964, which is, the ultimate gold watch, and then went on to do most of the most important work in his life after he got his ostensible gold watch. And it was an amazing group of people who won the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964. This year that award came up because Rush Limbaugh received it from our current president. Well, in 1964, along with John Gardner, some of the winners were Helen Keller, John Steinbeck, T.S. Eliot, Walt Disney, Aaron Copland, Reinhold Niebuhr, Edward R. Murrow. It was a bumper class. But one of the other people who's not nearly as well known who received the Presidential Medal of Freedom that year is a person that I wanted to start out by talking about today, because I think he has a lot to say about the importance of being a modern elder. And I would hope you'll indulge me. For the first 10 minutes or so, I want to talk about some historical context, which I think helps to put some of the challenges we're facing today in a clearer light, and the significance of what it means to be a modern elder. And that other person who I want to talk about is a guy by the name of Lewis Mumford, who was the New Yorker's architectural critic for 30 years, and along with Jane Jacobs, one of the great visionaries of urban life in America over the past century. 8 years before he got that award in 1964, he wrote the cover article for Architectural Record. And Mumford was the person who discovered Frank Lloyd Wright and the Chicago School of Architecture, but he wrote that article not about architecture, but about what it meant to be an elder in society and about aging. He had just turned 61 himself. Little did he know he would live to 100 and have almost 4 decades in front of him. But that day he was in a despairing mood when he wrote that article. He said at no point in any society had older people been more rejected than in America today. And this came a few years after Walter Reuther, the great UAW leader, described retirees as too old to work, too young to die. And he said, you know, it's great, we've added all these years to life. Problem is we put them at the wrong end of life. And Mumford was a man of action and of strong opinions, and he wasn't there to despair. He was there to lay out his prescriptions for how we could fix this problem. And he had 2 in particular. The first thing he had to say is that whatever we do, we have to avoid infantilizing older people and turning later life into a kind of second childhood. But his primary message was expressed in the title of his article, which is that we had to do everything possible to keep older people from being pushed to the outskirts of society. The article was entitled "For Older People, Not Segregation, Integration." And that same year, 1956, a guy by the name of Big Ben Schleifer put the finishing touches on the first retirement community in America, built centrally around the 2 things, doing exactly the opposite of everything that Mumford said. That community was around creating a place where older people could be kids again, have a second childhood. Its name was Youngtown, and its core principle was radical age segregation, in part because Big Ben Schleifer wanted to create a community that was affordable for older people living on Social Security. But he also discovered that preserving the illusion of a second childhood was helped greatly by the absence of any real children. If everybody was old, then nobody was old. And he was no less idealistic than Lewis Mumford was. He was a socialist. He was trying to create a kibbutz on the outskirts of Phoenix for older people, except he believed that there was no hope in mainstream society, that the only place where older people could find dignity and joy and community was apart from everybody else in America of 1956. And so these 2 visions were articulated almost the same time, and I don't have to tell you which one carried the day. Youngtown was featured that same year on Dave Garroway's Wide Wide World TV show, the Today Show of the time, watched by millions of people, captured the American imagination. One of the people who watched that show was Del Webb, who built across the street from the 100 homes of Youngtown the first Sun City, where 60,000 people live. And when he opened Sun City on January 1st, 1960, 100,000 people showed up. There was a traffic jam for 22 miles to get there. Older people all over America dropped whatever they were doing and went to the godforsaken cotton field 20 miles outside of Phoenix to live what Webb coined the golden years. And so it was a big change. We were at this crossroads. We picked one particular route, and in truth, and this is my last indulgence in history, it was a turning point in a century-long transformation of American society. So the United States began the 20th century as one of the most age-integrated societies in the world and ended it as the most age-segregated. In fact, Andrew Scott, the author of The 100-Year Life, another wonderful book, professor at London Business School, describes it as a state of age apartheid. In 19th century America, all the generations were woven together. People lived in multi-generational houses. They worked side by side, young people, older people, in an agrarian economy. Even the one-room schoolhouse had 5-year-olds and 40-year-olds learning to read side by side. People had no idea how old they were. If you were to ask somebody in 19th century America their age, it would be like asking your colleagues from MEA what their blood type is. You'd never even think to do it. It seemed totally irrelevant. And then in the as we moved into the 20th century, we decided to reorganize society around efficiency. And it was the result in many cases of progressive reforms. So child labor laws and universal schooling led to young people being in schools with other young people. Great breakthroughs like Social Security had as an explicit purpose getting older people out of the workforce at a time when we had 20% unemployment among young people. Then we created senior centers and retirement communities and one institution after another that was for older people exclusively, and the generational twains stopped meeting. Young people were in schools, middle people were at work, and older people were off to the sidelines. And there were positive results of that. But when we look back from the current perspective, I think we've created a society that runs against the grain of much of what we've learned about human thriving. And it turns out that Youngtown, that great idealistic kibbutz in the middle of the desert that Big Ben Schleifer created, ended up becoming the embodiment of this grievous wound that we've inflicted on ourselves. In the late 90s, they were in the national press again, but it wasn't a fawning portrait on daytime TV. They were in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Economist. Why were they in the news? Because they were ejecting a pair of grandparents, their crime harboring their grandson, Chaz Cope, who was running from an abusive father elsewhere in Arizona. The only place he had to turn were his grandparents. Did the Youngtown community rally around them and bring them lasagnas and ask how they could help out? Instead, they started fining them $100 a day for harboring children and planted a sign on their lawn. It's like the scarlet letter that said harboring children. The New York Times pointed out that dogs were allowed at Youngtown, not children. And across the street at Del Webb's massive Sun City community, the most popular volunteer activity at that point and to this day are the age police, which are our volunteer retirees, many of them former law enforcement personnel who follow school buses around in the area to make sure they're not dropping children off at Sun City. So is it any surprise in that context, in a state of age apartheid, that we're hearing about conflict between the generations, okay boomer, okay millennial? Is it any surprise that ageism has become so rampant, or that loneliness is considered the single greatest public health epidemic in America today, maybe after COVID now? The equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and the two loneliest groups in society are older people and younger ones. Again, a society that runs against the grain of human thriving. And now, as we become a more old than young society, 2019 was the first year in American history we had more people over 60 than under 18. We really got to fix this. This has got to change. And my central message today is an optimistic one, that we can fix this, we can change it, that Lewis Mumford was right and he was realistic at the same time. And this is where I was just so happy to listen to Carrie and Stephen talking about love, because I feel like the work that I'm involved in, and even my message today, is really a message of essentially of love that flows up and down the generational chain. And it's a kind of interdependence and need that goes to the beginning of human history. A lot of evolutionary anthropologists today feel that the only reason we became human beings in the first place is because grandmothers played this critical role taking care of young children while both parents in hunter-gatherer societies were able to go out and hunt and gather, and that enabled the long helpless period that allows human babies to grow large brains and be human beings. So this is not a new idea, but what we have learned over the last half century is that the needs and the assets of younger and older people fit together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. I spent the first 15 years of my career working to come up with new ideas for schools and social programs to help young people. And the main thing that I learned is that love matters most when it comes to the development, the healthy development of kids. And Yuri Bronfenbrenner, one of the great child psychologists of the 20th century, the co-founder of the Head Start program, was a professor at Cornell for 40 years. At the end of his life, after having written 24 books and 1,000 articles, was asked what he had learned from all of this research. And he said, what every child needs is at least one adult who's irrationally crazy about them. And what I've learned since then, and I say this as a 62-year-old, is that those of us in the second half of life need to be irrationally crazy about young people. Again, the jigsaw puzzle that fits together. So Laura Carstensen, a friend of Chip's and mine and a former Encore board member, has spent years doing research developing a theory called socio-emotional selectivity, which sounds very complicated and obscure with lots of formulas. In fact, it's the simplest idea in the world. What she's shown is that human beings have an inchoate capacity to know how much time is left in life. And when we get to this point where we realize that there are fewer days ahead than behind in some kind of rough way, it has an impact. You know, if somebody tells you you have a month left to live, you don't think, wow, this would be a terrific time to learn German, or boy, I always wanted to take up the oboe. No, you go see the people that you love. You focus on relationship. And she showed this over and over again in studies, even with young people who, you know, are given this idea of fewer days ahead. It drives us towards relationship. And what Laura and other developmental psychologists focused on adulthood have shown is that there's some other good news, which is that as we get older, we not only focus on relationships, but we get really good at them. I keep telling myself that every time I'm, you know, being mean to my children or to my wife, but emotional regulation, empathy blossom in later life, and they turn out to be the absolute key to happiness. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, the gold standard of research on well-being in adulthood, has discovered that happiness is based on relationship. George Valent, the psychiatrist who ran it for 40 years, says happiness is love, full stop. And he goes further and shows that there's a direction to all this connection, and it's downward. He's shown that older people who mentor and support young people, who essentially embody the modern elder ethos, are 3 times as likely to be happy as those who fail to do so. You know, I'm used to looking at social science studies, which people are 12% happy or, you know, 21% happy. And that's, you know, major national news. 3 times as likely to be happy. And he says it's not an accident. It kind of goes back to the grandmother hypothesis. He says it's baked into human development and evolution. And he has a beautiful phrase, biology flows downhill. And, you know, to go back to some of those earlier comments and to Youngtown and age apartheid, if biology flows downhill, why have we been trying to swim upstream? Why have we made that so difficult in modern American life and through much of the world? We essentially rerouted the river of life, and we need to return it to its natural course. And the good news I'm here to impart is not only does that fit with human development and human evolution, but we're already seeing a movement of people who I guess are in the realm of human resilience, who are returning that river of life to its natural course. And it reminds me, to switch metaphors, David Brooks wrote a book, The Second Mountain, last year, and in it he tells a story that has really stuck with me, and it's about a guy in Southern California who buys a house and who hates bamboo, and it has a bamboo grove at this house. And so the first thing he does after signing his papers to own the house is to go to Ace Hardware and buy a bunch of tools and come back and chop down the bamboo grove. And in the process, he pours bag after bag of bamboo poison plant killer on top of it. And then he brings in a contractor to lay down a sidewalk over the bamboo grove, you know, and it's like on the 7th day he rests. And a year later, the bamboo is breaking through the sidewalk. And, you know, there's something about human nature that is driving us to reconnect across generations, despite all of these years of trying to make that harder and harder. And I spent 2 years traveling around the world looking at examples of it, and came away extraordinarily inspired and animated and hopeful. I went to Singapore, where they've spent 3 billion Singaporean dollars, 2.1 billion American dollars for a city of 4 million people to create, in their words, a kampung for all ages, kampung being the Malay word for village, built around the ideal of intergenerational harmony. And they've done it, despite these lofty sounding goals in ruthlessly pragmatic ways. No surprise for Singapore. Every new senior center in Singapore that's built is co-located with a preschool. Every new housing complex that's built is built around the idea of 3-gen flats. They've created a volunteer corps of 100,000 elders who are focusing on schools and helping the next generation thrive. Every playground that's built is designed in a way that's built around the intergenerational accessibility. And the complete opposite end, I went to the UK, where Lucy Kellaway, this wonderful journalist at the Financial Times, daughter did the British equivalent of Teach for America, Teach First, and was so inspired by that. She flipped the whole old adage of, following in your parents' footsteps. She followed in her daughter's footsteps, wrote a column 3 years ago in the Financial Times at the age of 58 saying, that's it. A year from now, I'm not going to be writing these columns anymore, even though I have the best job in the world. I'm going to be teaching math in front of a low-income London classroom. And then she went and did something that nobody else of that stature has ended up doing here in the United States. She challenged her readers of a certain age to quit their jobs and to follow her. She was kind of a Pied Piper. 1,000 people signed up for Now Teach, the program that she created. They had 20 slots. They had 50 people applying for every slot. They eventually got it up to 40. In Finland, there's this massive effort to create community grandparents, because even in Finland, grandparents and grandchildren aren't living in the same place frequently. And so to try to create bonds between older and younger people who aren't related by blood. And here in the United States, I'll just tell you 2 stories that have really inspired me. So one, I went to Cleveland in November a couple of years ago to a fancy 1920s hotel that had been turned into an assisted living community called Judson Manor. And when I showed up, there were 40 Swedish social scientists in the lobby. And, you got to ask the question, why are the Swedish social scientists coming to the Rust Belt in November to figure out ideas about how we can live better? That's, usually we're going to Stockholm to do that. And they were at Judson Manor because they were in the middle of an experiment where the culturally literate, music-loving residents of Judson Manor, which is poised between the Cleveland Clinic on one side, Case Western University, all the major arts institutions of Cleveland on the other side, had decided to create a program where they were providing free living for graduate students in music in return for these students playing concerts. And it was kind of, an efficient exchange. These young people got free housing, these older people, music-loving older people got free concerts. Well, it turns out what starts out with efficiency in this realm oftentimes ends up in humanity. I'll just tell you one story. When I went there, I met this 93-year-old woman, Carla, who told me about the young violist who had lived next door to her during that year, who married another young violist who was a grad student at the conservatory. And when they planned their wedding, they didn't invite Carla to the wedding. They asked her to be the maid of honor. And it made me realize that the key in so much of this is a combination of proximity and purpose, of being able to be near each other and having common interests. And I think that's so essential. And it brings me to my other story before I kind of round the corner and try to take take this home, which is my favorite new group, which is Nuns and Nuns. So it's N-U-N-S and N-O-N-E-S. So, you know, when these survey companies like Pew Research do studies of millennials, they oftentimes conclude that millennials are N-O-N-E-S's. They're spiritually inclined, but religiously unaffiliated. And a group of these NONESs starting at Harvard Divinity School decided that, you know, they want to live a life of purpose, of dedication to a cause greater than themselves, fighting poverty, creating a more equitable world. And they needed modern elders to do that. And so who did they reach out to? But in 17 communities around the country, they started meetups with NUNSs, older women who dedicated their lives to creating a better world, oftentimes taking a vow of poverty to do that. And when I first met them, they were in residence together at the Mercy Center in Burlingame, trying to figure out how they could work to create a better world. And it was so interesting, the NUNSs, orders were shrinking, in many cases dying out, but they were much more interested in their work living on through the next generation, not necessarily through the form that they chose. And so before the virus hit, they were had deployed to the border to work on refugee issues, and were planning a major voter registration turnout campaign in Wisconsin for the election. So there's, you know, the bamboo is breaking through the sidewalk. People are fixing this. And I think if you take a step back and look at the lessons from these, there are lessons that the Modern Elder Academy and the Modern Elder Ideal embody so beautifully. I mean, the first is a new ethos. Rather than trying so hard to be young, to be there for those who actually are. And also a dedication to creating the kinds of institutions and opportunities that can serve us in this new century, to be as creative in bringing people together across age as we've been in splitting them apart. And I think the big unanswered question, I mean, there are people living out that ethos. There are wonderful examples of new arrangements that are making it more possible, but we've got a lot more Big Ben Schleifers than we do Del Webbs. We really need to find ways to scale these ideas that are commensurate with the need, with the opportunity. I'm convinced we can do it. We can fix this. We have to fix it in a more old than young demographic context, but I'm also convinced that it can fix us. It can reconnect us to a fundamental part of the human experience that we've been in danger of squandering. There's a lot of efficiency in this, and in fact, I always feel like I want to invoke another one of my heroes, Maggie Kuhn, who founded the Grey Panthers, and who's buried in my native Philadelphia under a gravestone that says, "Here lies Maggie Kuhn under the only stone she left unturned." She said something that is very appropriate to the COVID moment, where we're telling people of a certain age to stay home, to stay safe, but really also to stay the hell out of the way. And Maggie said, we don't have a single person to waste. And that is true. But I think even beyond the efficiency in her statement is the humanity that I saw at Judson Manor. Older and younger people need each other. Was true at the beginning of human history. It's as true as ever today. It was something that Lewis Mumford understood. He said at one point that every generation revolts against its parents and falls in love with its grandparents. But the Greeks knew that too. They had a beautiful expression: society grows great when older people plant trees under whose shade they shall never sit. And it seems to me the perfect watchword for a modern elder in the times of old in the present day, and no better benediction or prescription for how we can make the most of the multi-generational society that's already washing over us. So with that, I'll stop and apologize again for the one long unpunctuated sentence, but I also express my gratitude to Chip and MEA and the chance to be with you today.
The pandemic is increasingly separating the older generation for fear of exposure. I feel this is a trend that will still worsen. The relationship with my kids and my parents have been quintessential and amazing, and now they cannot interact. We are not alone. How can we mend the ever-growing divide to accomplish the goals you envision that are so wonderful?
That's very much on my mind as well, and I feel almost at every turn in those remarks, I needed to take a sidestep and talk about the pandemic. Chip wrote a column recently in which he talked about the mother of invention. I think I've got it over here somewhere, and I feel like my hope is that the pandemic can be the grandmother of invention and can prompt us to come up with new and better vehicles to connect people, not during this time of physical distancing and beyond. And one of my favorite examples is one that Chip just wrote about, Eldera, that's being launched by 3 entrepreneurs, including Dana Griffin, I think, who's one of Chip's mentees. And they're directly addressing the need of so many young people today to have additional educational support. People are talking about the COVID slide, the learning losses that young people are facing. I mean, just the state of young people. 5 years ago, Robert Putnam, the Harvard political scientist who wrote Bowling Alone, wrote a book called Our Kids, and said that the state of children in America today was so bad that it was going to destroy the American dream for a century. And then the pandemic hit. And so this is an all hands on deck moment when it comes to kids. And these kids, within families need their grandparents, beyond families into communities, need modern elders in their lives. And we have really got to get creative and brilliant and entrepreneurial to find new ways to connect generations for mutual benefit. There are some terrific things that are going on now. One of my favorite, but they're mostly focused within families, is Caribou, that was started out of Miami, but has been growing rapidly. And it's a platform that enables grandparents and grandchildren to connect and provides learning materials. There was a recent New York Times op-ed about the need for a grandparent academy. One of the Times opinion writers talked about the role his parents were playing in educating their children. But I think it needs to go beyond the period of physical distancing. And my dream, so I'll just say this for a few minutes, but JFK gave the most remarkable speech on aging that's ever been given in American history 6 months before he was assassinated in 1963. He got up in front of Congress and said we'd add years to life. Now it was time to add life to those years. And since that point, we've added 2 months a year on average to the American lifespan. And we basically whiffed when it comes to adding life to those years. And he set out this vision of a national mobilization of older people focused on creating a better future. And it was a few years after his Ask Not speech to the young boomers, and it was almost like he was speaking to their future selves and providing this vision of a mobilization of older people to transform society. And he said we were wasting resources of incalculable value. Right? This is a 40-something president writing 1963. Have you heard anything like that from any president, Democrat or Republican, since, or any of the 70-something presidential candidates? So I think we need a call to action, and I think we need a call to innovation as well to make that action not only possible, but to have the greatest impact.
Wow, Mark, you're amazing. I mean, I think we would have questions all day long. I would like to call on 2 people. Luther has a great question for you, and then we'll have Chip go after Luther, or we would be here for the rest of the weekend for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Mark. This is Luther. Great talk. I really loved it. What I was just wondering is you mentioned so many different projects and things out there. I mean, what would you pick if you said, okay, what are the best multi-generational projects around the world that you think should be and can be done in the United States today, what would one or two of those be?
That's a great question. I have a lot of, I've been thinking a lot about housing lately because housing played such an enormous role in separating the generations out. And, this is, I guess, a hopeful comment. We created this state of age apartheid in 50 years, really. And if we could, and it was created by brilliant entrepreneurs, particularly housing entrepreneurs. And they did it so effectively that it seemed like it was the oxygen in the air, that things had always been like this, when in fact, for thousands and thousands of years, they'd been anything like that. And so I've been paying particular attention to a group of housing entrepreneurs. I just spoke yesterday with this woman, Noelle Marcus, who is in her late 20s, had graduated from the MIT City Planning Program a few years ago, and her senior project was a home sharing effort between older people and young people that has taken Boston by storm and is now expanding to Columbus and to Seattle. And the basic idea is that older people who have room to spare can have roommates. They start out with graduate students being in Boston where there's so much higher education, who pay reduced rent, do some chores. But again, it's what starts in efficiency, ends in humanity. And Brenda Atchison, one of the older women living in Roxbury in Boston, was telling me about her experience having this young person living in her house. And I asked her, was there a moment that she could think of that really captured it? And she described coming home on a winter night and walking down the street towards her house, and the lights were on. And it reminded her as a child of what it was like to come home and have the lights on. So I think that there's a lot of creativity in the housing space. I could give other examples as well, but I think it's a really important arena to start.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
So,
Chip.
Yeah, no question here, just a thank you. People have heard me say before, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of your life is to give it away. And you gave a lot away today, Mark. You gave so much away. When a talk online is going well, when you actually see the number of participants actually growing. That happened here, and that at the end of a day, at the end of a program, that doesn't usually happen. So we just appreciate that we are partners with you. I'm on your board, and I love that. Your senior advisor, your senior person, Marcy's on our guest faculty. We are looking at ways to collaborate. I learn from you. You are my mutual mentor, and what I really appreciate is that you have given us the gift as a community, the MEA alum community, of so much. I mean, I think everybody is a bit bowled over by how many facts, quotes, social science white papers, so I just feel that blessed. We started the day talking about gratitude and generosity, and I feel a lot of gratitude toward you, and I hope that our MEA alum community feels that as well as the generosity to just give back somehow to MEA based upon our full day together. I really appreciate you being the icing on the cake.
Well, Chip, the feeling's mutual, and I always know whenever I give a talk that the highlight is going to be when I talk about the modern elder idea. It's at that point that people wake up and start nodding, and so the gratitude runs both ways. And thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate it.